Imagine for a moment that the cup in your hand isn't filled with water, tea, or coffee, but with something far stranger, something brewed from ingredients you'd never expect to drink. Across thousands of years, humans have experimented with liquids not just for survival, but for ritual, healing, status, and sometimes simply because no one knew any better. Some of these drinks would be considered delicacies in their time, while others might make you gag at the mere thought. Yet each of them reveals something fascinating about the people who made them and the worlds they lived in. Tonight, we re-diving into the strange and often shocking history of ancient beverages, the ones that could leave you wide-eyed in disbelief, or oddly grateful for your modern drink of choice. Before we go further, I'd love for you to take a moment to subscribe to History for Sleep. This channel is here to help you relax, unwind, and gently drift off while we explore the forgotten, bizarre, and sometimes comforting stories of the past. If you enjoy falling asleep to history, this is your place. And in the comments, let me know what you're most curious about, or even just when and where you're listening in from. I always find it fascinating to see who's joining in, whether you're tuning in before bed, during a restless night, or in the middle of the day when you just need a peaceful break. So settle in, dim the lights, and get comfortable. Maybe sip your own drink, hopefully something far less unusual than what we'll be discussing tonight. Over the course of this journey, we'll wander through ancient taverns, royal banquets, sacred rituals, and desperate moments of survival, exploring the strangest things that ever filled a cup in human history. Some drinks were meant to heal, others to intoxicate, and some were purely symbolic, but all of them tell a story about how people lived, what they believed, and how they survived. By the end, you may never look at your glass the same way again. Now, let's begin. Imagine for a moment a world without soda, without coffee, without even the idea of what we would call a drink menu. For the earliest people, liquid was not a matter of choice, but of survival. Water could be clean, but more often it was questionable, carrying unseen dangers. Out of this necessity, and perhaps out of sheer accident, something extraordinary was born. The first fermented drinks, precursors to beer as we know it, were stumbled upon long before humans had the science to explain what was happening. These early beverages were not refined lagers or ales with crisp flavors, but slurries and cloudy brews that blurred the line between drink and food. And yet, they shaped entire civilizations. The story begins in Mesopotamia, a fertile crescent of rivers and soil where agriculture took root. Imagine a clay jar of stored grain left a little too long in the damp air. Rain seeps in, wild yeast drifts invisibly, and suddenly the mush inside starts to bubble. Instead of throwing it away, someone tasted it. What they discovered was something entirely new. It had a faint sweetness, a gentle buzz, and most importantly, it seemed to be safe. That accident became one of humanity's greatest discoveries: fermentation. The earliest versions of beer were not brewed in the sense we know today. They were more like a thick porridge, bread dissolved in water, left to sour and transform. To drink it was to consume both food and liquid at once. It was filling, intoxicating, and it carried with it a sense of mystery. The Sumerians even had hymns to Ninkasi, the goddess of beer. Their poems praised her for the gift of this strange drink that brought both joy and relief. Beer was not just a casual indulgence, but a staple of daily life. Workers building temples and canals were often paid in beer rations, thick and hearty enough to sustain them through long days under the Mesopotamian sun. It became a measure of value, a unit of payment, and a symbol of civilization itself. Where there was grain and water, there could be beer. And where there was beer, communities could thrive. To sip from a jar of that early brew was not only to quench thirst, but to join in a practice that bound people together. Meanwhile, in China, thousands of miles away, another experiment was unfolding. Archaeologists have uncovered ceramic vessels dating back 9,000 years containing residues of honey, rice, and fruit. These were the ingredients of another ancient fermented drink, one that blurred the lines between beer, wine, and mead. Picture the flavor, sweet and tart, with a hint of wildness from natural yeasts. These early Chinese brews may have been used in rituals, sipped in gatherings that carried spiritual weight. Drinking was never only about the liquid itself, but about what it represented: connection to the gods, to ancestors, and to one another. A sip of fermented honey and rice was a taste of both earth and spirit. What made these drinks so powerful was their transformation. Grain or fruit left alone could spoil, rot, or become inedible. But with fermentation, it became something alive, something preserved, something almost magical. Ancient people had no way of knowing about yeast, enzymes, or the chemistry at play. To them, the bubbling and foaming seemed like the work of unseen spirits. And in a way, it was. These drinks were alive, carrying with them the mystery of life itself. To consume them was to take in not just calories, but a strange energy that altered mood and perception. A dull day could be softened by its warmth, and a ritual could be deepened by its otherworldly effects. As centuries passed, these early fermented drinks became more refined, though never by the standards we hold today. Recipes varied from village to village, and flavors were inconsistent. One jar might taste sour and sharp, another sweet and mellow. Ingredients could include barley, emmer wheat, dates, or honey, depending on what was available. Some were strained through reed straws to avoid drinking the gritty bits of grain, while others were simply scooped up as they were. The act of drinking itself became social, communal, and symbolic. To share a fermented brew was to share trust, to invite someone into a circle of fellowship that stretched back through generations. What is remarkable is that these strange early drinks were not just about pleasure. They were safer than water, which often carried disease. They were more nourishing than plain liquids, carrying nutrients from grain and fruit. And they were deeply tied to religion and ritual. The Egyptians, inheriting traditions from Mesopotamia, made beer a daily staple, linking it to offerings for gods and to the sustenance of workers building the pyramids. In their tomb paintings, beer is shown as an essential element of the afterlife. To drink beer was to live, and to have beer in the afterlife was to continue living well. Consider also how these drinks changed human culture. Farming grain was no longer just about bread, but about the possibility of brewing. Communities had reason to settle, to cultivate, and to build storage systems. Entire economies grew up around grain, not only as food, but as the foundation of society's favorite drink. The village brewer, often a woman, became a central figure. She carried recipes passed down through generations, guarded secrets of fermentation, and ensured that the community had access to this strange but essential brew. In many ways, civilization itself is tied to the discovery of beer before beer. Now, imagine the taste. Thick, slightly sour, faintly sweet, with a texture closer to gruel than to liquid. It would be unrecognizable to us, but to them, it was a gift. A jar passed around a circle of workers, or a family gathered at the end of a day. Laughter would rise as the effects settled in, a warmth spreading through tired bodies. Songs might be sung, stories told, and prayers whispered. Each sip carried with it a sense of wonder that such a thing could exist at all. It is humbling to think that one of the cornerstones of human culture came not from invention, but from accident. Grain left in the rain, fruit forgotten in a pot, honey stirred into water and left to sit. These accidents became tradition, and tradition became civilization. What we call beer today is the descendant of those bubbling, half-solid jars of nourishment from thousands of years ago. The flavors may have changed, the clarity refined, but the essence remains the same, a drink that sustains, connects, and transforms. As you drift into rest, picture those first hands lifting a clay jar, curious, cautious, perhaps even a little fearful. The sip they took connected them to us in a way that spans millennia. Every toast today, every clink of glasses, carries echoes of that moment. And though we might wrinkle our noses at the thought of drinking porridge like beer, it was the start of a tradition that defined humanity's journey. A drink before drinks, a beer before beer, shaping the world one sip at a time. When we think of drinks today, we often imagine comfort, refreshment, or perhaps a way to relax after a long day. But for many ancient cultures, what was poured into a cup was far more than a casual indulgence. It was a vessel of meaning, a connection between the physical and the divine. Among the most striking examples of this are the ritual beverages of the ancient Americas, where drinks were not only consumed for taste or intoxication, but as offerings of life itself. To understand these strange concoctions is to step into a world where the act of drinking was also an act of sacrifice, of devotion, and of profound symbolism. Let us begin with the Maya, a civilization known for its art, architecture, and complex spiritual life. For the Maya, cacao was more than just a bean. It was sacred, believed to be a gift from the gods. Unlike the sweet chocolate drinks we know today, their cacao was bitter, foamy, and mixed with spices like chili or annatto. But at times, something even more startling was added: human blood. Ritual drinks of cacao were sometimes mingled with drops of blood drawn from nobles or priests in acts of self-sacrifice. By mixing the two, they created a drink that symbolized the mingling of human vitality with divine sustenance. To drink it was to reaffirm the bond between people and gods, to participate in the eternal cycle of life and death. It is difficult for us to imagine sipping such a concoction, but to the Maya it was powerful beyond measure. Blood was the essence of life, and cacao was a sacred medium. Combined, they formed the liquid offering that carried prayers into the spiritual realm. When nobles performed bloodletting rituals, pricking their tongues or piercing their skin, the blood was not wasted. It was often caught on paper, then dissolved into drinks or burned in offerings. To consume such a drink was to participate directly in cosmic order, ensuring that the gods were nourished and the world kept in balance. This was not done casually, but in carefully timed ceremonies accompanied by chants, music, and incense. The Aztecs, too, practiced similar rituals. Their world revolved around the idea that the gods had sacrificed themselves to bring the sun and life to earth. In return, humanity owed a debt repaid through offerings of blood and sacrifice. Chocolate, again bitter and spiced, was a central part of ritual life. Warriors, before battle, sometimes drank cacao infused with blood to channel strength and courage. The mixture was thought to empower them, filling their bodies with both earthly energy and divine vitality. To the Aztecs, such a drink was not grotesque but glorious, a necessary act to maintain harmony between the human and divine worlds. Outside of cacao, other ritual drinks carried strange and unsettling elements. In some Mesoamerican traditions, pulque a milky, fermented drink made from the sap of the agave plant, was given ritual significance. Pulque was intoxicating, thick, and tied to fertility and the cycles of nature. During festivals, it was consumed not only as a way to celebrate, but as a way to open the gates of perception, allowing humans to step closer to the gods. Myths told of divine beings themselves drinking pulque, and humans who partook did so as imitators of the divine. The frothy, sour drink was considered a sacred substance, bound up in rules and taboos about who could drink it, when, and how much. For the Inca in South America, another ritual drink dominated: chicha, a fermented beverage made from maize. But the way it was prepared might give modern drinkers pause. The maize was often chewed by women, who spat it out into communal vessels. Their saliva contained enzymes that helped break down the starches, beginning fermentation. This mouth-brewed drink was then left to ferment before being consumed at feasts and rituals. To outsiders, this might seem unclean, but to the Inca, It was an act of communal contribution. The drink carried the essence of those who prepared it. Their spirit mingled with the maize, becoming something greater than the sum of its parts. Chicha was not only nourishment, but also a way of binding people together in festivals, rituals, and even political ceremonies. Consider the psychological effect of these drinks. To sip cacao laced with blood, to share pulque in a festival, to drink chicha prepared by many hands, these were not acts of private indulgence, but of shared identity. The liquid in the cup was never just a drink. It was the blood of ancestors, the gift of the gods, the bond of community. The act of raising the cup was a prayer, and the act of drinking was participation in a cosmic drama that stretched beyond the individual into the very heart of creation. The taste might have been strange, sour, even unsettling, but the meaning outweighed any discomfort. We should also remember that many of these ritual drinks were tied to altered states of consciousness. Intoxication itself was seen as a sacred act, a way of loosening the bonds of ordinary life and stepping into the realm of the spiritual. For the Aztecs, becoming drunk on pulque was acceptable during certain festivals, when order gave way to sacred chaos. For the Inca, the sharing of chicha marked not just a feast, but a moment of communion. And for the Maya, cacao with blood was not about intoxication, but about transformation, the crossing of boundaries between mortal and divine. If we place ourselves in their shoes, we might begin to see how powerful these rituals were. Imagine a crowded plaza, torches burning, drums echoing through the night. The priest draws blood, mixes it into cacao, and offers it to the gathered nobles. They drink, their lips stained not with wine, but with the essence of life itself. To them, this was not horror, but holiness, an act that kept the world alive. Or picture an Inca feast, where bowls of chicha are passed from hand to hand. Each sip connects you not only to your neighbor, but to the empire itself, to the ancestors who taught the art of brewing, and to the gods who blessed the maize. Every mouthful carries weight, both spiritual and social. Of course, these practices could also be used to reinforce power. Rulers controlled the rituals, decided who could drink and when. Access to sacred beverages was a sign of status. To be given the cup was to be recognized, included, honored. To be denied was to be excluded from the life of the community. Drinks could be both unifying and dividing, a reminder that what we consume can be as political as it is personal. Even the act of preparation carried meaning. Noble blood in cacao signified sacrifice, while common saliva in chicha symbolized the labor of the people. Every ingredient, no matter how strange, carried layers of significance. Looking back from our modern perspective, it is easy to recoil at the thought of drinking blood or saliva-fermented maize. But to dismiss these practices would be to miss their deeper meaning. These were cultures for whom life and death, human and divine, were not sharply divided. To drink blood was to acknowledge the cycle of sacrifice and renewal. To drink chicha was to honor the work of hands and the gift of the land. To drink pulque was to step briefly into the realm of the gods. What seems bizarre to us was sacred to them, and in those cups they found strength, identity, and connection. As you let your thoughts drift, imagine holding such a cup yourself. The taste may not be pleasant, but the atmosphere around you is electric with meaning. Drums beat, fires crackle, chants rise into the night. You raise the cup, not for yourself alone, but for your ancestors, your community, and the gods who watch over you. The liquid is strange, but it binds you to everything around you. In that moment, the boundary between human and divine blurs, and you are part of something eternal. The ritual drink in your hands is more than sustenance. It is life itself, carried in a cup, shared through generations, and remembered in whispers of history that reach us even now. When we think of ancient Greece and Rome, we often picture banquets, feasts, and goblets of wine raised high in celebration. Wine was central to their culture, a symbol of refinement, philosophy, and even divinity. Yet what they called wine would not resemble the bottles we find on shelves today. Their wines were thick, sweet, and often harsh. To make them more palatable or more interesting, they mixed in a surprising variety of additives. Some were harmless herbs and spices. Others were bizarre, even dangerous by our standards. To drink wine in the ancient world was to experience a concoction shaped not only by grapes, but by imagination, superstition, and sometimes toxic ignorance. Let us begin in Greece, where wine was considered a gift of Dionysus, the god of revelry and transformation. The Greeks rarely drank wine plain. They almost always diluted it with water, believing that undiluted wine was barbaric and dangerous. But dilution was only the beginning. Into their wine, they often added honey, herbs, and spices. The sweet and the bitter blended together, creating a drink that could be tailored to mood, occasion, or purpose. Sometimes the additives were medicinal, intended to soothe ailments or balance the body's humors. Other times, they were simply for flavor, enhancing the richness of the drink. The symposium, a central social event in Greek culture, revolved around wine. Men reclined on couches, discussing philosophy, poetry, and politics, all while drinking wine carefully mixed by a symposiarch, the master of the drinking party. He decided the ratio of water to wine, the herbs or spices to be added, and the pace at which the cups circulated. Wine, in this context, was not simply for intoxication, but for the creation of a certain atmosphere, a balance between sobriety and delight, between thought and abandon. The strange mixtures were part of that delicate calibration. The Romans inherited this love of wine and took it to new extremes. Their empire stretched across continents, and with it came a vast array of ingredients. Roman vintners experimented constantly, adding seawater, resin, herbs, and even ground oyster shells to their wines. Seawater gave the drink a salty tang and was believed to preserve it. Resin, sometimes from pine trees, created a sharp flavor, not unlike the Greek retsina that still exists today. Oyster shells may have been added for their mineral content, or perhaps simply as a curiosity. The Romans were not shy about experimenting with what could go into their cups. Some Roman practices, however, were far more troubling. One of the most notorious was the use of lead. Lead acetate, sometimes called sugar of lead, was used to sweeten wine. It masked sourness and gave a pleasant smoothness to the drink. At the time, no one understood the dangers of lead poisoning. To the Romans, it was a simple and effective additive, a way to make wine taste better and last longer. Wealthy households often favored these sweeter wines, unaware that the very drink they prized was slowly poisoning them. Historians debate how widespread this practice was, but it is clear that lead played a role in Roman winemaking, with consequences that stretched through generations. Beyond additives, the Romans also infused their wines with medicinal intent. Recipes survive that describe wines mixed with herbs to treat ailments. Wormwood for digestion, myrrh for pain, and countless other plants were steeped into wine to create tonics. These concoctions blurred the line between medicine and beverage, a tradition that carried forward into medieval and early modern Europe with spiced wines, mulled drinks, and eventually even spirits like absinthe. To drink wine was, in many cases, to treat the body as well as to indulge the senses. We might ask ourselves, what did these wines actually taste like? The descriptions suggest a wide range, some sweet and syrupy, others sharp and resinous, others salty or even metallic. For the Greeks and Romans, this was not strange. To them, wine was a living product, variable and unpredictable. A wine with seawater might recall the sea. A wine with resin might evoke the forest. To drink was to taste not only the grape, but the world around it, captured in liquid form. Each cup was a story, a reflection of geography, trade, and culture. Wine also carried symbolic weight. In Greece, it was tied to Dionysus, to the mysteries of ecstasy and transformation. In Rome, it was tied to Bacchus, to festivals where order dissolved into revelry. The additives were part of this symbolism, enhancing the sense that wine was not just a drink but a portal. A cup of resinous wine could transport you to the wilds. A cup sweetened with honey could feel divine. A cup mixed with herbs could carry the promise of healing. To drink was to step into a space where ordinary boundaries blurred. Consider, too, the role of class in these practices. Fine wines, aged and carefully crafted, were the domain of the wealthy. The poor often drank sour, rough wines, sometimes further diluted or mixed with whatever was available. Posca, a mixture of sour wine and water, was the drink of soldiers and common folk. Yet even among the wealthy, additives were markers of taste and status. Exotic spices imported from distant lands, rare herbs, or the sweetness of lead-treated wine all signaled wealth and refinement. To serve such a drink was to display power, to impress guests, to participate in the culture of luxury. But luxury had its dangers. Lead, of course, poisoned slowly, affecting the nervous system, damaging health in ways that were invisible until it was too late. Some historians have speculated that widespread lead poisoning contributed to the decline of Rome, weakening its elites. Whether or not that is true, the image of senators sipping sweetened wine, unknowingly harming themselves, remains a haunting reminder of how culture can blind us to danger. What was once seen as refinement may, in hindsight, appear as folly. The Greeks and Romans were not alone in their strange mixtures. Across the ancient world, people experimented with drinks in similar ways. Yet their practices stand out for the sheer variety of additives, the willingness to transform wine into something endlessly adaptable. For them, wine was not a finished product, but a canvas, to be painted with whatever flavors, textures, or meanings they desired. This flexibility helped wine spread across the empire, becoming a staple not only of banquets, but of daily life. Imagine then reclining in a Roman triclinium, the air heavy with incense, the table laden with food. A slave pours you a cup of wine dark, thick, and scented with pine resin. You sip, and the flavor is sharp, unfamiliar. Another cup arrives, this one sweetened with honey, smooth and cloying. Later still, a cup tinged with seawater, briny and strange. Each drink tells you something about where you are, about the choices of your host, about the vast reach of Rome itself. To drink is to participate in empire, to taste its wealth, its ambitions, and its contradictions. In the end, what we see in these odd additives is the human impulse to shape experience. Wine was never just about quenching thirst. It was about crafting meaning, creating moments, building connections. The Greeks sought balance, the Romans sought variety, and both found ways to turn the grape into something far more than a simple drink. We may recoil at the thought of seawater or lead in our cups, but for them, these choices were natural, even necessary. They remind us that taste is cultural, shaped by time and place, always changing. As you let yourself relax, picture those ancient feasts. The laughter, the debates, the clinking of cups. The wine may be strange, but the act of sharing it is familiar. Across thousands of years, across all the additives and experiments, one thing remains the same: the desire to come together, to connect over a shared cup. And in that simple act, the oddities fade, leaving behind the enduring truth that what we drink is never just liquid, but a reflection of who we are. When we think of Egypt, images of pyramids, pharaohs, and the Nile often come to mind. But beneath those grand monuments and the sweep of history lies something much more ordinary and intimate, the daily drink of the Egyptian people. Beer, more than just a beverage, was at the very center of Egyptian life. It was sustenance, currency, medicine, and even a gift to the gods. To understand ancient Egypt fully, we must not only walk among its temples, but also sit at its tables, where beer was poured not into elegant goblets, but into clay jars. frothy, thick, and nourishing. For the Egyptians, beer was as essential as bread, and in many ways, the two were inseparable. Beer in Egypt was not like the clear, golden lagers we imagine today. It was cloudy, thick, and hearty, more akin to a liquid loaf of bread than a refreshing drink. The Egyptians brewed it using emmer wheat and barley, which were partially baked into loaves and then soaked in water. Natural fermentation transformed this mixture into a drink that carried both calories and a mild intoxicating effect. Imagine drinking something that was part porridge, part beer, a slurry with floating bits of grain. It may not sound appealing to us, but to them, it was life itself. In fact, bread and beer together formed the foundation of the Egyptian diet, often called the staff of life. This drink was not limited to the wealthy or the ruling classes. Everyone, from farmers to pyramid builders to pharaohs, consumed beer. Workers building the Great Pyramids, for example, were paid not in coins, but in rations of bread and beer. A laborer could expect several liters of beer a day, a portion that provided hydration, energy, and a sense of satisfaction. Far from being a drink of indulgence, beer was considered necessary fuel for the demanding work of building monuments that would last millennia. Archaeologists have even uncovered breweries near construction sites, evidence of the vast effort required to keep workers supplied with this daily staple. The Egyptians also flavored their beers in ways that may surprise us. Dates were often added for sweetness, and sometimes herbs or spices were mixed in to alter the taste or give it medicinal properties. Honey could transform a common beer into a luxurious one, reserved for the elite or for special occasions. Each variation carried meaning, whether practical, festive, or ritualistic. A sweetened beer might be offered to a god, while a plain one might fuel the labor of thousands. The spectrum of Egyptian beer reflected the spectrum of Egyptian life itself. Beer also held a sacred dimension. It was associated with Hathor, the goddess of love, music, and joy, who was sometimes called the mistress of drunkenness. Festivals dedicated to her often involved excessive drinking, where participants celebrated, danced, and sang, all while drinking beer in her honor. One famous tale tells of how Hathor, in her fierce form as Sekhmet, nearly destroyed humanity in a fit of rage. To stop her, the gods brewed vast amounts of beer, dyed it red to resemble blood, and poured it onto the fields. Sekhmet drank it, became intoxicated, and her fury subsided. Humanity was saved not by force, but by beer. This story underscores the dual nature of the drink, both joyous and dangerous, both a gift and a tool of control. In daily life, beer also played a role in medicine. Papyrus texts describe recipes in which beer was mixed with herbs to create remedies for everything from stomach ailments to childbirth pains. Doctors prescribed beer as a base for delivering medicinal plants, and priests used it in rituals of healing. It was considered both a physical and spiritual aid, capable of restoring balance to the body and connecting the drinker to divine forces. In a world without pharmacies, the brewery was as much a place of healing as it was of nourishment. Beer was even part of the afterlife. Tomb paintings and grave goods often depict beer jars alongside bread, ensuring that the deceased would have sustenance in the next world. Just as beer was essential to life, it was considered essential to eternity. A pharaoh's tomb might contain elaborate jars of beer, offerings meant to sustain him in the afterlife as he journeyed among the gods. For the common person, simpler depictions of beer-making scenes in tomb art expressed the same hope, that life as most basic comforts would continue beyond death. But what did this beer taste like? Scholars have attempted to recreate ancient Egyptian beer based on archaeological evidence and written records. The results are thick, sour, and earthy, far from the crisp beers of today. Some brews had a fruity sweetness from dates or honey, while others were harsher, more bitter. Drinking, it would have been more about nourishment than refreshment, a way to fill the belly and quench thirst simultaneously. Imagine workers at a pyramid site, pausing from their toil to sip from clay jars filled with this grainy, frothy liquid. The taste may not have been refined, but it was sustaining, and that mattered more than anything. Beer also shaped social life. Families brewed it at home, sharing it with neighbors and guests. Larger breweries supplied temples and state projects. Drinking together was a way of reinforcing bonds, celebrating victories, or simply enduring the hardships of daily labor. In villages, beer was part of every gathering, every ritual, every moment of communal life. To refuse a cup of beer would have been almost unthinkable, an act of separation from the rhythms of community. Beer was not merely liquid. It was social glue. The scale of beer production in Egypt was immense. Excavations have revealed large-scale breweries capable of producing thousands of liters at a time. Clay jars with residues of beer have been found across the land, from humble homes to royal tombs. The sheer presence of beer in every corner of Egyptian archaeology testifies to its importance. It was not a luxury, but a necessity, as vital as the Nile itself. Without beer, Egypt as we know it could not have existed. Its workers, its rituals, its medicine, and its afterlife all flowed with this cloudy, nourishing drink. It is worth noting that beer was often safer than water. The fermentation process killed harmful bacteria, making beer a reliable source of hydration in a land where the Nile could both sustain and threaten life. For Egyptians, drinking beer was not a matter of indulgence, but of survival. Even children drank it, albeit weaker versions. It was woven into every stage of life, from the first sips of childhood to the final offerings of death. Beer was the Nile in liquid form, life-giving, sustaining, and eternal. Imagine then an Egyptian festival. The air is hot, the sun blazing. Musicians play, dancers twirl, and jars of beer are passed among the crowd. The drink is thick, frothy, a little sweet with dates. Laughter rises, songs fill the air, and joy spills over. Or imagine the quiet of a tomb, where jars of beer rest beside bread, awaiting the spirit of the deceased. In both moments, beer is present, carrying its meaning across the span of human experience. To drink was to live, and to offer beer was to bless. In the grand sweep of Egyptian history, beer may seem humble compared to pyramids or hieroglyphs. Yet it was the daily drink that made all those achievements possible. Without it, workers might not have had the strength to build, priests might not have had the medium for ritual, and families might not have had the bond of shared cups. Beer was Egypt's quiet engine, its unheralded sustainer. The monuments still stand, but behind them is the story of countless jars of cloudy, nourishing beer, poured, shared, and remembered. As you rest, picture yourself in an Egyptian village, the sun setting over the Nile, the air filled with the scent of grain and earth. Someone hands you a clay jar. You sip, and the taste is strange sour, thick, with a hint of sweetness. But in that sip, you share in a tradition older than most monuments, a tradition that bound together a civilization for thousands of years. Beer was Egypt's lifeblood, and in that simple, humble drink, the story of a great civilization flows quietly, endlessly, like the river itself. When we think of Vikings, we imagine long ships slicing through icy waters, warriors clad in fur and iron, and halls filled with firelight and song. Yet behind those images lies a drink that bound their society together, a drink both simple and mystical. Mead. Made from honey, water, and fermentation, mead was at once a farmer's drink, a warrior's celebration, and a sacred offering. But the Vikings, like many ancient peoples, rarely left a drink untouched. Into their mead, they sometimes added herbs, plants, or even hallucinogens, creating concoctions that blurred the line between sustenance and sorcery. To understand Viking life, we must step into their mead halls, where cups overflowed not only with drink, but with meaning. Mead itself is ancient, perhaps the oldest alcoholic beverage humanity ever discovered. Honey, when diluted with water, ferments naturally. The result is sweet, intoxicating, and surprisingly durable. For the Vikings, honey was precious, gathered in small amounts from wild hives or carefully tended bees. To turn honey into mead was to transform sweetness into something stronger, a drink that could be stored, shared, and celebrated. Mead was not for everyday thirst that was left to ale or water, but for moments of importance. Weddings, funerals, victories, and seasonal festivals were marked with mead, its golden color shining in torchlight, its sweetness warming the drinker in cold northern nights. Yet Viking mead was not always plain. Archaeological finds and sagas suggest that it was often infused with herbs such as juniper, bog myrtle, and yarrow. These additions added flavor, but they also carried symbolic or medicinal significance. Bog myrtle, for instance, has mild psychoactive properties, while yarrow was linked to healing. Drinking mead with such herbs was not only a matter of taste, but of intention. A warrior preparing for battle might drink to gain courage. A shaman might drink to open the mind to visions. Mead became a vehicle for more than intoxication. It was a bridge to the mystical. Some scholars believe that the Vikings may also have experimented with more potent additions. Amanita muscaria, the red and white mushroom often depicted in folklore, grows across northern Europe. This mushroom is hallucinogenic, and while dangerous if mishandled, it has long been linked to shamanic practices in various northern cultures. It is possible that certain ritual drinks included extracts of such mushrooms, creating altered states that were interpreted as contact with the divine. Imagine a Viking seer drinking mead infused with herbs and fungi, chanting by the fire as visions unfolded. In such moments, the boundaries between human and divine, real and imagined, might dissolve. The mead hall was the heart of Viking social life. These great wooden buildings were more than dining spaces. They were places of storytelling, judgment, and community. At the center of it all was mead. To drink together was to affirm bonds of loyalty, to celebrate kinship, and to honor the gods. Skalds recited sagas as cups passed from hand to hand, each story punctuated by the raising of a horn filled with golden mead. In these halls, drink was not only sustenance, but ceremony. The passing of the horn symbolized unity, binding warriors to their lord and to one another. The myths of the Norse also reflect the importance of mead. One of the most famous tales is that of the mead of poetry. According to legend, the gods created a magical mead from the blood of a wise man named Kvasir, whose knowledge was unsurpassed. This mead, when drunk, granted the gift of poetry and wisdom. The giant Suttung guarded it, but Odin, ever cunning, stole it and brought it to the gods. From this story comes the belief that poets and skalds drank from Odin's gift, their words flowing like mead itself. The tale reflects the idea that mead was not just drink, but inspiration, wisdom, and divine favor in liquid form. In daily Viking life, brewing mead was often the work of women. Women were the keepers of recipes, the tenders of bees, and the guardians of the household supply. In this role, they held a quiet but powerful influence, shaping the social and ceremonial life of their communities. A well-made mead could enhance a feast, seal an alliance, or honor a god. Brewing was not just domestic labor, but a vital contribution to the fabric of society. The skill to balance honey, water, and herbs was part science, part art, part sacred duty. But mead was not the only drink. Ale, brewed from barley, was more common and often consumed daily. Yet ale lacked the mystical aura of mead. Mead's rarity, sweetness, and golden sheen set it apart. To drink mead was to step into a different realm, one tied to myth and ritual. Mead was also associated with Valhalla, the hall of the slain, where warriors who died bravely were said to feast forever, drinking endless cups of mead served by Valkyries. This vision of eternal reward underscored the drink's importance. It was the nectar of the afterlife, the drink of the chosen. What might Viking mead have tasted like? Imagine a drink sweet but earthy, thick with the richness of honey, and flavored with herbs unfamiliar to modern palates. A hint of bitterness from yarrow, a sharpness from juniper, a wild tang from bog plants. If mushrooms or other potent ingredients were included, the effects might have been disorienting, dreamlike, and unsettling. To sip such a drink in the flickering firelight of a hall, surrounded by warriors, chants, and the pounding of drums, would have been an overwhelming experience. Taste was secondary to effect, and the effect was both communal and transcendent. Mead also carried political weight. To be offered a horn of mead by a lord was an honor, a sign of inclusion and loyalty. To refuse was unthinkable, a rejection of fellowship. Mead was part of the ritual of power, binding warriors to leaders, leaders to gods, and communities to one another. The simple act of drinking carried layers of meaning, woven into the fabric of Viking life. It was not just a drink. It was a symbol, a contract, a ritual enacted night after night in smoky halls across the north. Even today, echoes of Viking mead remain. Modern brewers attempt to recreate recipes, experimenting with honey and herbs, seeking to capture a taste of the past. Mead festivals celebrate this ancient drink, and in literature and popular imagination, mead remains tied to the idea of the Viking fierce, communal, and bound to myth. To taste mead today is to sip from history, to connect with a world where every drink was a story, every horn a ritual. As you drift deeper into relaxation, picture yourself in a Viking hall. The fire crackles, smoke curls to the rafters, and voices rise in song. A horn is passed to you, carved and polished, filled with golden liquid. You lift it, the sweetness of honey mingling with the scent of herbs. Around you, warriors laugh, poets recite, and the hall is alive with the pulse of community. You drink, and for a moment, you feel the warmth of kinship, the stir of myth, the brush of the divine. The mead in your hand is more than honey and water. It is the lifeblood of a people, the echo of their stories, the taste of their eternity. Across the vast landscape of ancient China, where dynasties rose and fell and philosophies blossomed, people sought not only prosperity and order, but also longevity. Life was precious, fragile, and fleeting, and the dream of extending it, perhaps even forever, was irresistible. This desire gave rise to a tradition of elixirs and potions, drinks prepared by alchemists who blended science, superstition, and hope. Some of these concoctions were based on herbs and minerals, others on metals and stones. To drink them was to gamble with fate, for some promised vitality while others carried poison. The history of Chinese elixirs is both fascinating and tragic, a tale of human longing and the dangers of chasing immortality. In early Chinese thought, balance and harmony defined health. The concepts of yin and yang, the five elements, and the flow of qi shaped how people understood the body and the universe. To live long was to maintain balance, but to live forever required something more. Alchemists, influenced by Taoist philosophy, believed that the secrets of eternity could be unlocked by transforming matter itself. By refining minerals, metals, and herbs, they sought to capture the essence of immortality in liquid form. These brews, often shimmering with strange ingredients, were consumed by emperors, nobles, and seekers of wisdom, each hoping to transcend the limits of mortality. One of the most notorious substances in these elixirs was mercury. Shiny, fluid, and mysterious, mercury fascinated alchemists. They believed it contained the power to purify and transform. Mixed into drinks, it was thought to extend life, fortify the body, and open the path to immortality. Yet mercury is deadly. Many emperors who consumed mercury-laced potions died prematurely, poisoned by their own desire. One infamous case is that of the first emperor of Qin, who unified China in 221 BC. He, obsessed with immortality, he consumed elixirs containing mercury, which likely hastened his death. His grand tomb, guarded by the terracotta army, stands as a monument not only to his ambition, but also to the tragic irony of his search for eternal life. Mercury was not the only dangerous ingredient. Lead, arsenic, and other toxic minerals were also used, ground into powders and dissolved into drinks. These substances could produce strange sensations, which were sometimes interpreted as signs of transformation. Tingling, dizziness, and hallucinations were taken as evidence that the potion was working, when in reality they were symptoms of poisoning. The pursuit of immortality led many down a path of suffering, their bodies ravaged by the very elixirs meant to save them. Not all potions were deadly. Some were based on herbs with real medicinal value. Ginseng, for instance, was prized for its ability to restore vitality. Goji berries, astragalus, and countless other plants were brewed into tonics meant to strengthen the body and prolong life. These herbal brews, rooted in traditional Chinese medicine, offered real benefits, supporting health and longevity in more practical ways. Over time, these gentler remedies coexisted with the more dangerous mineral elixirs, reflecting the broad spectrum of approaches to the same eternal desire. The making of elixirs was shrouded in ritual. Alchemists worked in secluded places, often mountains, where the air was pure and the energies favorable. They mixed their ingredients with chants and offerings, believing that spiritual forces guided their work. The vessels themselves were special bronze cauldrons, ceramic jars, sometimes even jade containers thought to channel purity. To prepare a potion was as much a spiritual act as a physical one. The drink was not just a liquid, but a condensed form of cosmic power, a link between heaven and earth, body and spirit. These elixirs were not only consumed by emperors, but also offered in rituals. Taoist sects taught that by ingesting certain potions, practitioners could transcend mortality and become immortal beings who roamed the heavens, free from decay. Stories abounded of sages who drank such potions and vanished into the sky, their bodies transformed into light. Whether these tales were allegories or wishful thinking, they fueled the belief that immortality was attainable, if only the right recipe could be found. Each new potion brought hope, even as many ended in tragedy. The paradox of Chinese elixirs is striking. On one hand, they represent the height of human aspiration, the desire to conquer death itself. On the other, they reveal the danger of misunderstanding nature, of seeking shortcuts where none exist. Emperors, with all their wealth and power, could command the making of potions, but could not escape the laws of biology. Their quest for eternity often shortened their lives, a cruel twist of fate that highlights the limits of human control. Yet these practices also gave rise to valuable discoveries. In the search for immortality, alchemists experimented with countless substances, laying the groundwork for early chemistry. The knowledge gained from these experiments, though born of superstition, contributed to advancements in metallurgy, medicine, and material science. In this way, the dream of immortality, though unrealized, spurred progress in unexpected directions. The line between folly and discovery was thin and often blurred. What must it have been like to drink one of these potions? Imagine a cup filled with shimmering liquid, its surface glinting with flecks of gold or mercury. The alchemist assures you of its power, the promise of strength, vitality, perhaps even eternity. You sip, and the taste is metallic, bitter, strange. Hours later, you feel warmth, then dizziness, perhaps visions that dance before your eyes. You tell yourself the potion is working, that your body is transforming, but in truth it is struggling, poisoned by the very liquid you hoped would save you. Hope and danger mingle in every swallow. The cultural backdrop of these practices is essential to understanding them. In China, the quest for harmony with the cosmos was central. Life was not seen as separate from the universe, but as part of a grand flow. To align oneself with this flow was to live well, to extend life, perhaps even indefinitely. Elixirs were one expression of this worldview, a tangible attempt to capture cosmic forces in a cup. Even if the potions failed, the belief in them reflected a profound desire to bridge the gap between human limitation and cosmic possibility. As time passed, attitudes toward elixirs shifted. By the later dynasties, skepticism grew about the more dangerous concoctions. Herbal medicine rose in prominence, offering safer and more effective ways to maintain health. The dream of immortality never vanished, but it evolved, expressed in spiritual practices, meditation, and the pursuit of inner harmony rather than dangerous potions. The legacy of the elixirs, however, remained a reminder of the risks of unchecked ambition, but also of the power of belief. Even today, the echoes of these practices linger. Traditional Chinese medicine still uses many herbs once associated with longevity. Modern culture remembers the tales of emperors who drank themselves to death in pursuit of eternity. The image of the alchemist, bent over a cauldron, seeking the secret of life, continues to inspire stories and cautionary lessons alike. To study these elixirs is to glimpse the timeless human struggle against mortality, the hope that somewhere, somehow, a drink might offer more than nourishment. It might offer eternity. As you settle deeper into rest, picture a Taoist alchemist in a mountain retreat. The fire flickers under a bronze cauldron, herbs and minerals bubbling within. The air is thick with incense, the night silent but for the crackle of flames. At last, the potion is poured into a jade cup, its surface gleaming. The alchemist lifts it to his lips, tasting both promise and peril. In that sip lies the eternal human dream, the desire to live beyond death, to hold time itself at bay. Though the potion may fail, the longing endures, as timeless as the mountains, as endless as the stars. Across the wide, windswept steppes of Central Asia, where herds of horses thundered across the grasslands and nomadic tribes moved with the seasons, a strange and powerful drink sustained warriors, families, and entire cultures. It was not beer, nor wine, nor mead. It was kumi, a beverage made from fermented maize milk. To outsiders, the idea of drinking sour, fizzy milk might seem unappealing, even revolting. But for the peoples of the steppe from the Scythians to the Mongols, it was both a daily staple and a sacred symbol. To understand kumi is to understand the resilience of nomads, their bond with horses, and their way of life shaped by endless horizons. Murray's milk is unlike cow's milk. It is thinner, sweeter, and less fatty, but it ferments quickly when exposed to air and stirred. The nomads discovered that by allowing it to sour in leather bags or wooden vessels, it transformed into an effervescent, lightly alcoholic drink. The fermentation killed harmful bacteria, extended the milk's shelf life, and created a beverage that could travel with the people as they moved across the steppe. Kumi became an ingenious solution to survival in a harsh environment where grain was scarce and vineyards impossible. What the land could not provide, the horse did. From the horse came transport, war power, companionship, and milk that became the lifeblood of a people. To drink kumi was to drink vitality. It was rich in vitamins and nutrients, providing energy for long rides and strength for battle. It had a tangy, sour taste, often compared to yogurt, but more acidic, with a faint fizz on the tongue. For those unaccustomed to it, the flavor could be shocking, even unpleasant. But for the nomads, it was as familiar and comforting as bread and beer were to settled peoples. Kami was consumed daily, by men, women, and even children, though the stronger, more alcoholic versions were often reserved for adults. It was nourishment, hydration, and celebration, all in one cup. The Scythians, one of the earliest steppe peoples noted by Greek historians, were described as drinking fermented maize milk. To the Greeks, this seemed bizarre, even barbaric. Herodotus wrote of the Scythians' strange customs, including their fondness for this sour milk. But what the Greeks dismissed as uncivilized was, in reality, an adaptation perfectly suited to life on the steppe. For the Scythians and their descendants, kumi was not only sustenance, but a mark of identity, something that set them apart from outsiders. To drink kumi was to declare yourself a child of the steppe, tied to horse and herd. The Mongols, centuries later, elevated kumi to an even greater cultural symbol. Under the leadership of Genghis Khan and his successors, the Mongol Empire expanded across Eurasia, fueled in part by the endurance and mobility of its horse-riding warriors. Kumi was central to their diet. Chronicles describe great feasts where barrels of kumi were brought forth, where lords and warriors drank deeply, toasting victories and forging alliances. To refuse kumi was unthinkable, almost an insult to Mongol hospitality. It was more than a drink. It was a ritual, a bond, a way of welcoming guests and sealing friendships. Mongol belief also tied kumi to spiritual strength. Horses were sacred animals, their milk seen as a gift of the gods. Drinking kumi was thought to confer power, vitality, and a connection to the divine. Shamans used it in rituals, offering kumi to spirits and ancestors, sprinkling it on the ground or into the fire as a form of blessing. Just as wine was tied to the gods of the Mediterranean, kumi was tied to the spirits of the steppe, a sacred liquid that linked the human and the spiritual worlds. To lift a cup of kumi was to honor not only the herd, but also the unseen forces guiding life. The preparation of kumi was itself an art. Fresh mare's milk was poured into leather bags, hung on doorways or saddles, and churned constantly as people passed by and pushed against it. This stirring encouraged fermentation, creating the distinctive sourness and fizz. The process was communal, involving the household, and the resulting drink was shared among all. Stronger kumi could be made by fermenting longer, producing a drink with more alcohol, while lighter versions were suitable for children and everyday use. Every household had its own variation, its own rhythm of fermentation, its own taste. To drink kumi was to taste the labor and care of the community. Travelers from outside the steppe often wrote of their encounters with kumi. Some were fascinated, others horrified. European envoys to the Mongol court in the 13th century described the sour, intoxicating milk, noting how central it was to Mongol hospitality. For many foreigners, the flavor was too strange to enjoy, but they recognized its importance. Refusing kumi could offend, while accepting it was a gesture of respect. To sip, even reluctantly, was to honor the culture of the steppe. In this way, kumi became a bridge, a way of negotiating between worlds, one sip at a time. Beyond its cultural role, kumi was also believed to have healing properties. Traditional steppe medicine praised it for strengthening the body, cleansing the system, and restoring energy. Even in more recent times, kumi has been studied for its probiotic qualities, with some clinics in the 19th and 20th centuries in Russia and Central Asia using kumi as a treatment for tuberculosis and digestive problems. The ancient belief in its healing power was not entirely misplaced. While it may not grant invincibility, it did offer real nutritional and microbial benefits. For nomads who relied on the horse for survival, kumi was both food and medicine. The symbolism of kumi extended into politics as well. Great Khans used the sharing of kumi as part of ceremonies of power. To drink with the Khan was to be accepted, honored, and bound by loyalty. In grand assemblies, barrels of kumi were distributed, cups raised, and alliances sealed. The act of drinking was a political statement, binding warriors to leaders, clans to confederations, and empires to unity. Kumi was the liquid thread weaving together the fabric of steppe society, from household to empire. What would it be like to taste kumi today? Imagine lifting a wooden cup, the liquid inside pale and cloudy, with a sharp, sour aroma. The first sip shocks the tongue, acidic, fizzy, tangy, unlike any milk you've known. But as you drink, you taste its richness, its energy, its uniqueness. Perhaps at first it seems alien, but slowly you understand why it was cherished. In that cup is the steppe itself, the horses, the wind, the endless sky, the rhythm of nomadic life. To drink kumi is to drink history, distilled in milk and time. As you rest, picture a Mongol camp on the open plain. The wind whistles through the grass, fires flicker, and families gather in felt tents. Outside, marais are milked, and the liquid poured into leather bags, stirred with laughter and conversation. Inside, warriors sit in a circle, their cups filled with kumi, toasting victories and calling upon the spirits. Children sip lighter versions, women share in the brewing, and shamans sprinkle drops into the fire as offerings. The drink unites them all, binding them to one another, to their herds, to their gods. In that circle, under the vast sky, kumi is more than nourishment. It is identity, spirit, and survival, flowing from the horse to the cup, from the earth to the people, from the past to the present. In the Roman world, wine was a marker of civilization. The wealthy drank it daily, flavored it with spices, and used it to celebrate victories and festivals. But for the common soldier, the farmer, or the laborer, wine was often too expensive or too rare to drink in abundance. Instead, another beverage filled their cups, Posca. This strange drink, made from sour wine or vinegar diluted with water, was cheap, safe, and practical. To us, it may sound unappealing. Why would anyone willingly drink watered-down vinegar? Yet for centuries, Posca was the drink of choice for Rome's legions and lower classes, sustaining them in battles, journeys, and daily life. Posca began with sour wine, sometimes the dregs left behind after the finer vintages were consumed. Wine, when left too long, naturally turned to vinegar. Instead of discarding it, Romans repurposed it by mixing it with water, sometimes adding herbs or honey to soften the taste. The result was a drink that was acidic, sharp, and refreshing in a world where clean water was not always guaranteed. The acidity of vinegar helped kill bacteria, making Posca safer to drink than untreated water drawn from wells or rivers. In this sense, it was practical, protective, and surprisingly modern in its effectiveness. For soldiers, Posca was essential. The Roman legions marched across Europe, Asia, and Africa, carrying their supplies with them. Wine was heavy and costly, but vinegar could be transported more easily and stretched further by diluting it into Posca. A soldier on a march might carry a flask of vinegar, mixing it with water from streams or wells along the way. The sharpness of Posca not only quenched thirst, but also masked the taste of questionable water. In hot climates, it was particularly refreshing, cutting through heat and exhaustion. For the legions, Posca was as much a part of military logistics as swords or shields. Accounts from antiquity confirm its ubiquity. Historians note that generals, emperors, and common soldiers alike drank Posca, though its association was always with the lower classes. To offer Posca to someone of high rank could be an insult, a reminder of poverty and rough living. Yet in times of need, even elites drank it, acknowledging its usefulness. One story tells of Emperor Hadrian, who deliberately drank Posca among his soldiers, showing solidarity by sharing in their simple fare. In this way, Posca was not only nourishment, but also a symbol of camaraderie and shared hardship. The taste of Posca, by modern standards, would have been unusual. Imagine a liquid both sour and diluted, a faint tongue of vinegar softened by water, perhaps slightly sweetened with honey, or flavored with herbs like coriander or mint. For those accustomed to rich wines, it must have seemed meager, but for thirsty soldiers, it was a welcome relief. The acidity could stimulate appetite, aid digestion, and provide a burst of refreshment after long hours under the sun. It was not a drink of indulgence, but of necessity, valued less for pleasure than for practicality. Posca also carried symbolic weight. In Roman culture, wine was tied to wealth, refinement, and the gods. Posca, by contrast, was tied to labor, humility, and endurance. To drink Posca was to embody the virtues of the common man: resilience, adaptability, and resourcefulness. In a society divided by class, Posca was a marker of status, but it was also a reminder that survival mattered more than luxury. Soldiers who drank Posca were not weakened by their lack of fine wine. They were strengthened by a drink that suited their needs. In its simplicity, Posca reflected the Roman ideal of discipline and practicality. Beyond the military, Posca was consumed by farmers and laborers across the empire. For those who worked long days in the fields or workshops, Posca was affordable and filling. Water alone might not be safe, and wine was too costly, but Posca offered a middle ground. It could be made at home with little effort, ensuring that families had something reliable to drink. In this sense, it was a democratic beverage, available to anyone, sustaining the backbone of Roman society. The empire may have been built on conquest, but it was maintained by the daily labor of ordinary people, fueled in part by this sour, humble drink. Interestingly, Posca also appears in religious contexts. Some interpretations of biblical accounts suggest that when Jesus was offered a sponge soaked in sour wine while on the cross, it may have been Posca. Soldiers stationed at crucifixions likely carried the drink, and the offer of it to a suffering man was consistent with their habits. Whether this act was one of cruelty or compassion is debated, but the presence of Posca in such a moment underscores its role as the drink of soldiers and the poor, carried even into the most profound scenes of history. The making of Posca was not uniform. Recipes varied depending on region, resources, and taste. Some versions were stronger, almost like diluted vinegar, while others were milder, with honey or herbs softening the acidity. The common thread was thrift. Nothing was wasted. Sour wine that might otherwise be discarded was given new life, ensuring that every drop of the grape served a purpose. This frugality reflected the Roman ethos, where practicality often outweighed indulgence. Even in luxury, Rome admired efficiency, and Posca was its humble expression. What might it have felt like to drink Posca on a long march? Picture yourself as a Roman soldier, armor heavy on your shoulders, the sun beating down, dust rising with every step. Your mouth is dry, your body weary. From your pack, you take a flask of vinegar, pour a splash into a water skin, and shake it. The liquid is thin, sour, but when you drink, it cuts through your thirst like a blade. The sharpness wakes you, steadies you, cools you. Around you, your comrades do the same, each sip reinforcing the bond of shared struggle. The taste is simple, but in that moment, it is exactly what you need. For all its simplicity, Posca endured for centuries, its practicality ensuring its place in Roman life. Long after the empire fell, similar drinks persisted in Europe, where vinegar-based beverages remained common among peasants and workers. In some rural traditions, water mixed with vinegar and sweetened with honey continued to be consumed well into the modern era, echoing the humble Roman drink. Today, it survives faintly in the form of shrubs or drinking vinegars, trendy beverages that recall the sharp refreshment once favored by soldiers and farmers alike. Posca's story is a reminder that not all historical drinks were grand or exotic. Some were born of necessity, humble yet powerful in their role. Wine may have symbolized Rome's glory, but Posca sustained its armies, fed its workers, and quenched its poor. It was not a drink to impress, but a drink to endure, a liquid companion in the daily struggle of life. In its sharpness, there was strength. In its simplicity, there was survival. As you drift into rest, imagine the rhythm of Roman life, the marching of legions, the toil of farmers, the clatter of workshops. In each scene, a cup of Posca is present, humble but constant. The sourness lingers on the tongue, the refreshment eases the body, and the bond of shared struggle is renewed. In the grand sweep of empire, Posca was a small thing, but it carried the weight of endurance, sustaining millions across centuries. And though the taste might startle us today, for the Romans, it was the taste of survival, the flavor of resilience in a world that demanded both. When we think of drinks, we often imagine nourishment, refreshment, or perhaps intoxication. But across the ancient Americas, drinks served another, more mysterious purpose. They were portals to the spirit world. From the rainforests of the Amazon to the deserts of North America, indigenous peoples brewed powerful concoctions that could alter perception, induce visions, and connect drinkers with gods, ancestors, and unseen realms. These psychoactive brews were never casual refreshments. They were sacred, prepared with ritual, and consumed in settings designed to open minds, heal souls, and guide communities. To drink them was to step across the boundary between the ordinary and the divine. Among the most famous of these brews is ayahuasca, prepared by tribes in the Amazon basin. Ayahuasca is made from the Banisteriopsis caapi vine, combined with leaves from the chacruna plant or other sources of DMT. Alone, these plants would have little effect, but together they create a powerful hallucinogenic drink. The fact that Amazonian peoples discovered this precise combination is astonishing. The jungle contains tens of thousands of plant species, yet they found the two that must be combined to unlock the psychoactive properties. This knowledge, passed down through generations, was seen not as coincidence, but as a gift from the spirits themselves. Drinking ayahuasca is not a light experience. It is often bitter, thick, and unpleasant in taste, and it can induce nausea and vomiting before visions begin. But within the ritual, these purges are seen as cleansing, removing illness and spiritual blockages from the body. Once the visions begin, participants may see animals, ancestors, or cosmic patterns, accompanied by feelings of connection, terror, or enlightenment. Shamans guide the process with songs, chants, and instruments, steering the drinker through the journey. To the tribes who use ayahuasca, it is not a drug but a medicine, a teacher, a sacred bridge between worlds. Far to the north, other psychoactive brews and drinks played similar roles. Among some Native American groups, ritual beverages were made by steeping peyote cactus or other hallucinogenic plants in water. The resulting drinks carried the mescaline alkaloid, producing visions and altered states. These drinks were used in ceremonies to connect with spirits, seek guidance, or heal illnesses. Like ayahuasca, they were not for pleasure, but for transformation, embedded within cultural frameworks that gave meaning to the experience. A sip of such a brew was a step into mystery, undertaken with reverence and caution. The role of these drinks in community life cannot be overstated. They were not consumed casually, but in carefully controlled rituals. Participants often fasted beforehand, purified themselves, or prepared through prayer and meditation. The setting was essential fires lit, songs sung, shamans present. In this way, the experience was guided, structured, and made safe. Without these frameworks, the visions could overwhelm, but within them, the drinker could emerge with new insights, healing, or wisdom. The drink was never just about the liquid, it was about the entire ritual that surrounded it. Other psychoactive drinks in the Americas included brews made from tobacco, often consumed in strong liquid forms far more potent than smoking. Some groups created infusions so concentrated that they induced dizziness, visions, or even unconsciousness. Tobacco was considered a sacred plant, a way to communicate with the spirit world, and its use in drink form amplified its power. Shamans consumed these drinks to receive messages from ancestors or gods, guiding their communities in decisions about war, agriculture, or healing. To outsiders, the practice might seem extreme, but to those who believed, it was essential, a channel to wisdom beyond the ordinary. Consider, too, the cultural symbolism of these drinks. In societies without written records, visions carried deep meaning. They were stories told by the cosmos, guidance offered by the unseen. A shaman who drank ayahuasca and saw a vision of a serpent might interpret it as a warning or blessing, shaping the choices of the community. A warrior who drank a peyote brew might find courage in visions of ancestors urging him forward. These drinks wove the spiritual into the fabric of daily life, ensuring that decisions were made not just with reason, but with divine counsel. What did these drinks taste like? Bitter, acrid, often unpleasant. Ayahuasca was thick and earthy, sometimes nauseating. Peyote drinks were intensely bitter, almost unpalatable. Tobacco brews were harsh, burning the throat. Yet the taste was secondary, almost irrelevant. The value lay in what came after the visions, the cleansing, the sense of contact with forces beyond the human. To drink was an act of endurance, a test of devotion, a step into the unknown. The unpleasantness only heightened a sense of significance, marking the drink as something sacred, not meant for casual enjoyment. These brews were also tied to healing. In many traditions, illness was seen as not only physical but spiritual. A person might be afflicted by an imbalance, a curse, or a wandering soul. To heal them, a shaman might prepare a psychoactive brew, guiding them through visions to confront the source of the illness. The purge that often accompanied the drink was interpreted as expelling sickness. In this way, the drink became both medicine and ritual, treating body and spirit together. The healing was not only for the individual, but for the community, restoring balance to the group as a whole. European explorers and missionaries who encountered these practices often misunderstood them. To some, they seemed barbaric or dangerous, evidence of superstition. Reports described the strange brews, the vomiting, the visions, with a mix of horror and fascination. Yet others recognized their power, noting that these rituals bound communities together and offered profound experiences. Even when condemned, the practices persisted, passed down in secret, sustained by faith and tradition. The drinks endured because they were more than beverages. They were lifelines to meaning, hope, and connection. In modern times, some of these traditions have re-emerged, attracting seekers from around the world. Ayahuasca ceremonies now draw participants far beyond the Amazon, each hoping for healing or enlightenment. While often controversial, these practices reflect the enduring human desire to reach beyond the ordinary, to find meaning in visions and altered states. The ancient brews, once confined to forests or deserts, now echo across the globe, reminding us of the deep roots of humanity's search for transcendence. Imagine, as you rest, sitting in a darkened hut in the rainforest. The air is thick with smoke and the sound of chanting. A shaman hands you a cup of thick, bitter liquid. You drink, and your body recoils at the taste, but soon you feel warmth, then dizziness, then visions unfolding like a dream. Colors swirl, animals appear, ancestors speak. Around you, others chant, their voices guiding you through the journey. In that moment, you are not just yourself, you are part of a web that stretches across time and spirit, woven by a drink that carries you beyond the boundaries of the ordinary. The psychoactive brews of the Americas were never about taste, they were about transformation, and in their strange bitterness lay the power to open doors to worlds unseen. Among the many mysteries of the ancient world, few are as intriguing as the drink called Soma, mentioned throughout the Rig Veda. One of the oldest sacred texts of India, Soma was more than a beverage. It was a god, a ritual, and a key to immortality. Poets praised it, priests prepared it, and warriors drank it before battle. Yet today, its true identity remains unknown. What exactly was Soma? Was it a plant, a mushroom, an herb? Or was it a mixture that has since been lost to time? To explore Soma is to explore a window into the spiritual life of Vedic India, where drink and divinity were one and the same. The Rig Veda, composed over 3,000 years ago, contains more than 100 hymns devoted to Soma. These hymns describe Soma as a living god, pressed into liquid form, consumed by both mortals and immortals. The drink was praised for its power to inspire poetry, grant strength, and connect the drinker to the divine. Indra, the warrior god, was said to drink vast quantities of Soma before slaying demons, his courage and might flowing directly from the sacred liquid. To drink Soma was to participate in cosmic drama, to share in the strength of gods and heroes. The preparation of Soma was itself a sacred ritual. Texts describe priests pressing the stalks of the Soma plant, filtering the juice through wool, and mixing it with milk or water. The liquid was golden in color, effervescent and intoxicating. It was offered to the gods in fire sacrifices, and it was drunk by priests and participants in elaborate ceremonies. The act of making and drinking Soma was not casual. It was central to Vedic religion, a way of bridging the human and divine. Each step of the process was infused with meaning, and each sip carried with it the weight of prayer and myth. But what plant was Soma? This question has puzzled scholars for centuries. Some suggest it may have been derived from a hallucinogenic mushroom, such as Amanita muscaria, the red and white mushroom used in other shamanic traditions. Others propose ephedra, a plant containing stimulants that could produce energy and alertness. Still others argue for cannabis, fly agaric, or even a lost species that no longer exists. The debate continues, with no consensus. Perhaps Soma was not a single plant, but a mixture, varying across regions and generations. The truth may never be known, but the mystery only deepens its allure. What is clear is that Soma was powerful, both physically and spiritually. The hymns describe it as exhilarating, visionary, and divine. Poets claimed their words flowed from Soma's inspiration, their verses infused with its energy. Warriors sought its courage, priests its wisdom, seekers its path to immortality. Soma was more than a drink, it was an experience, a transformation, a glimpse of eternity. To drink Soma was to transcend the ordinary, to touch the infinite, to join the gods in their celestial realm. A symbolism of Soma extended beyond the cup. It was linked to the moon, which was believed to wax and wane as the gods drank Soma in the heavens. It was tied to fertility, vitality, and the eternal cycle of life and death. In ritual, it was poured into fire as an offering, its smoke carrying prayers to the gods. In myth, it was a source of power and a token of immortality. Soma was everywhere in poetry, ritual, and imagination, shaping the very fabric of Vedic culture. What might it have tasted like? The hymns suggest it was sharp, perhaps bitter, with a golden hue and a sense of vitality. Mixed with milk or water, it might have had a creamy, earthy flavor, unlike anything familiar to us. To drink it was not for pleasure, but for transformation. The taste was less important than the effect, which was described as exhilarating, mind-expanding, and divine. Each sip was a step into another world, a communion with forces beyond human comprehension. The ritual context is essential to understanding Soma. It was not consumed in isolation, but as part of elaborate ceremonies, involving fire, chanting, and sacrifice. Priests sang hymns as Soma was prepared and offered, their voices rising in praise of its divine power. The act of drinking was collective, binding the community together in shared devotion. In this way, Soma was not only a personal experience, but a communal one, reinforcing social bonds and cosmic order. To drink Soma was to affirm one's place in the universe, to align oneself with gods and ancestors. Over time, however, the practice of Soma faded. Later Vedic texts mentioned substitutes, and eventually the true identity of Soma was lost. By the time of the classical Hindu epics, Soma remained as a mythological symbol rather than a literal drink. It lived on in stories of gods and heroes, but no longer in the cups of mortals. The reasons for its disappearance are unclear. Perhaps the plant became scarce, or perhaps its ritual significance was absorbed into new traditions. Whatever the cause, Soma passed from practice into memory, leaving behind only hymns and questions. Yet the idea of Soma did not vanish entirely. It survived as a symbol of immortality, a divine nectar akin to the Amrita of later Hindu and Buddhist traditions. In these stories, Amrita was churned from the cosmic ocean, granting eternal life to gods. The echoes of Soma are clear, a drink that bridges heaven and earth, life and eternity. In this way, Soma's spirit endured, even as the drink itself disappeared. The longing it represented, the desire for transcendence, remained at the heart of spiritual traditions across India. Imagine, as you rest, sitting beside a Vedic fire sacrifice. The flames crackle, priests chant hymns, and stalks of the Soma plant are pressed and strained. The liquid flows golden into bowls, offered first to the gods, then to the participants. You lift the cup, the taste strange and bitter, but soon you feel a rush of energy, a lifting of the spirit, a sense of connection to forces far beyond yourself. Around you, chants rise, the fire glows, the night opens into eternity. In that moment, you are no longer just human. You are part of the cosmos, joined to the gods through the sacred drink. Such was Soma, the drink of immortality, the mystery of Vedic India, and one of the strangest, most powerful beverages in human history. Throughout history, when people think of drinks, they often imagine feasts, celebrations, or sacred rituals. But in times of famine, war, or disaster, the contents of a cup could be far more desperate. Not all drinks were born of abundance or creativity. Some were born of necessity. When food was scarce and thirst unrelenting, people turned to the earth itself, crafting survival beverages out of clay, dirt, and ash. These were not delicacies, not ritual offerings, but last resort drinks that kept people alive when nothing else was available. To sip from such a cup was not an act of enjoyment, but of endurance, proof of the length humanity will go to survive. Clay and dirt drinking has been documented in various parts of the world, particularly in regions struck by famine. In some cases, people dissolved fine clay in water, creating a gritty, earthy liquid that filled the stomach and quieted hunger pains. While nutritionally poor, it offered minerals and, more importantly, the illusion of fullness. Archaeological and ethnographic evidence suggests that during extreme scarcity, such practices were common in Africa, Asia, and the Americas. The taste would have been strange, chalky, and unpleasant, but for those starving, it was better than nothing. The act of drinking dirt was not about flavor, it was about survival. Ash, too, found its way into desperate drinks. Wood ash, when mixed with water, creates a lye-like liquid that can be harmful if too strong, but in diluted forms, it was sometimes consumed as a mineral supplement. In some cultures, ash water was used medicinally, thought to cleanse or balance the body. In times of scarcity, it might have doubled as a drink of necessity, a way to trick the stomach into feeling less empty. Imagine the bitterness of ashen water, the faint taste of smoke and earth. To modern palates, it sounds repulsive, but in desperate times, it was sustenance of a kind. There are also accounts of people drinking mud. During sieges or famines, when supplies ran out, people dug into riverbanks or fields, mixing mud with water and straining it as best they could. The resulting drink was thick, foul, and potentially dangerous, but it offered at least a sense of relief. Historical records from various famines describe such measures, with a line between food and dirt blurred. To drink mud was to cling to life at its most fragile, a testament to human resilience under unbearable conditions. These survival drinks were not unique to one culture or era. They appear in accounts from medieval Europe during famine years, from indigenous groups facing drought, and from enslaved peoples who were denied adequate food. The universality of these practices underscores a grim reality. When hunger strikes, humans will consume whatever is at hand. A cup of dirt water might mean another day of survival, another chance for rescue, another moment to hope. The desperation of these drinks tells us much about the hardships of the past, the fragility of life, and the stubborn will to endure. Yet not all earth-based drinks were purely desperate. In some traditions, Clay and earth were deliberately consumed for their supposed health benefits. Geophagy, or earth-eating, has been practiced for millennia, often by pregnant women seeking minerals. Clay mixed with water could settle stomachs, provide iron, or soothe digestion. In these cases, the drink was not a famine food, but a deliberate tonic, part of cultural practices tied to health and belief. The line between survival necessity and medicinal choice is blurred, reminding us that context shapes meaning. What one person drinks in desperation, another may drink in ritual or healing. Imagine the psychological weight of these survival beverages. To raise a cup filled with ash water or clay slurry is to confront the edge of existence. Each sip is both relief and sorrow relief, that the stomach is not entirely empty, sorrow that nothing better is available. Parents might mix clay water for children, watching their faces grimace, but knowing it might ease their suffering. Soldiers under siege might drink mud water together, sharing in the bitter reality of endurance. In such moments, the drink becomes more than liquid. It becomes a symbol of determination, a refusal to give in, even when the world offers nothing. There are also stories of hope woven into these grim practices. Survivors often remembered the strange drinks of famine as symbols of resilience. To say, "we drank dirt to survive," was not only a memory of suffering, but also of triumph. It meant that even in the darkest times, people found a way. These drinks, as strange and unpalatable as they were, carried lives through famine, war, and disaster, allowing communities to endure and rebuild. The memory of them became part of cultural identity, passed down in stories of hardship and perseverance. What would such drinks taste like to us today? Bitter, chalky, gritty, smoky. The tongue would recoil, the stomach churn. Yet for those who needed them, taste was irrelevant. The point was not pleasure, but survival. In that moment, the cup was not a luxury, but a lifeline. To sip dirt water was to say, "I will live another day." To drink ash was to say, "I will not give up." The human spirit, expressed through such acts, reveals itself in its starkest form, not in feasts or celebrations, but in the desperate act of drinking the earth itself. Even in these survival drinks, there is a strange poetry. Earth to earth, ash to ash, dust to dust, these phrases echo through human history, reminders of our connection to the ground beneath our feet. To drink clay or ash is, in a way, to embody that connection literally, to consume the earth as both sustenance and symbol. It is humbling to think that in times of crisis, humans turn not to abundance, but to the soil itself, the most basic element of existence, and found a way to endure. As you settle into rest, picture a village struck by famine. The fields are barren, the granaries empty. Families gather around a small fire, mixing clay with water, straining it through cloth, pouring the gritty liquid into clay cups. They drink slowly, grimacing at the taste, but with each sip, they find the strength to face another day. In that humble, desperate act lies the essence of resilience. The drink is strange, even unsettling, but it is life. And through it, humanity continues, fragile yet unbroken, sustained by the earth itself. When we imagine the Middle Ages, we often picture knights, castles, and cathedrals. But behind the banners and battles, life was filled with sickness. Plagues swept through cities, fevers haunted villages, and injuries from war or labor were common. With limited understanding of disease, people turned to whatever remedies they could find. Among the most common treatments were medicinal brews, strange concoctions of herbs, minerals, and even animal parts, dissolved in ale or wine and drunk as cures. These drinks were not made for pleasure, but for healing, blending superstition, early science, and desperation. To sip a medieval medicinal brew was to put hope in a cup, even if the taste was bitter, strange, or downright dangerous. Herbs formed the backbone of these brews. Monks in monasteries cultivated gardens filled with plants believed to cure ailments. Chamomile for digestion, mint for the stomach, valerian for sleep, and sage for strength. These were steeped in ale or wine, creating drinks thought to carry healing powers. Wine and ale themselves were considered medicinal, capable of warming the body and warding off illness. When combined with herbs, they became vehicles for delivering remedies, the alcohol preserving the mixture and extracting the plant's properties. A sick person might be given a cup of spiced wine, not to comfort them in luxury, but to fight their fever or cleanse their body. But herbs were only part of the story. Some brews contained ingredients that sound shocking to us today. Ground bone, crushed insects, or even powdered gemstones were sometimes dissolved into drinks. In medieval thought, the body was governed by the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Illness arose when these humors were out of balance. To restore equilibrium, physicians prescribed remedies that often drew on symbolic connections rather than evidence. A ruby powder might be given for strength, beetle parts for vitality, or even ground skulls for headaches. The logic was tenuous, but in a world without modern medicine, any remedy offered hope. One particularly unsettling brew involved the use of mummy powder. In the later Middle Ages and Renaissance, ground remains of mummified bodies were believed to hold healing power. Mixed into wine or ale, this powder was consumed as a cure for a variety of ailments. The belief was that the preserved vitality of the body could be transferred to the drinker. Though disturbing to us, it reflects the desperation and symbolic thinking of the time. To drink such a potion was to consume not only matter but meaning, the hope of absorbing life from death itself. Another common practice was to steep opium poppies or henbane in wine, creating pain-relieving drinks. These concoctions could dull pain, induce sleep, or even render a patient unconscious for surgery. They were dangerous, sometimes fatal, but they represented the best attempts of medieval healers to manage suffering. Imagine a patient writhing with pain, handed a cup of dark wine laced with narcotic herbs. The taste bitter, the effect heavy, but soon the pain recedes into drowsy oblivion. These brews were precursors to anesthesia, rough and risky, but essential in a world with few alternatives. Superstition also guided the making of medicinal brews. Astrological charts were consulted to determine when to harvest herbs, which ingredients to mix, and when to administer the potion. The stars, the moon, and the planets were thought to influence health, and aligning remedies with celestial forces was believed to enhance their power. A drink might be more effective if brewed under a certain phase of the moon, or if the patient drank it at a specific hour. In this way, medicine was entwined with magic, science with superstition, each sip carrying not only physical ingredients, but cosmic timing. Monasteries played a key role in preserving and advancing medicinal brewing. Monks copied ancient texts, experimented with herbs, and developed recipes that blended tradition with observation. Some of these brews survived into modern herbal medicine, their effectiveness supported by science. Others were more symbolic, their power lying in belief rather than chemistry. Yet all were part of the medieval world's attempt to confront illness with the tools at hand. The brewing of medicine was as important as the brewing of ale, each sustaining life in different ways. What did these drinks taste like? Bitter, pungent, often unpleasant. Herbs steeped in wine created strong, earthy flavors. Minerals added grit, powders created sludge, and narcotics made the liquid heavy and numbing. To drink was not to enjoy, but to endure, trusting that the unpleasant taste was proof of its potency. Patients gagged, grimaced, and forced it down, clinging to hope that the bitterness would bring relief. In some cases, it did. In others, it did nothing or even caused harm. But the act of drinking itself carried meaning, a ritual of healing that gave comfort, even when results were uncertain. Medicinal brews were also deeply tied to religion. Many cures invoked saints, with drinks prepared in their names or blessed by priests. A cup of wine mixed with herbs might be offered alongside prayers, the healing attributed as much to divine favor as to the ingredients. Pilgrims carried bottles of holy water, sometimes mixed with herbs, as protective drinks. The line between medicine and miracle was thin, and often they were one and the same. To drink was not only to heal the body, but to invite the aid of heaven. In villages, wise women and healers prepared their own brews, drawing on local plants and traditions. Their knowledge was practical, passed down through generations. Some remedies worked, others did not. But for communities with little access to formal physicians, these brews were lifelines. A mother might brew a tea of willow bark for her feverish child, unknowingly providing salicin, the precursor to aspirin. Such practices remind us that amid superstition and error, genuine insights into medicine were also present, hidden in the bitter cups of the past. Imagine yourself as a medieval patient. Fever burns through you, weakness grips your limbs. A healer brings a cup wine steeped with bitter herbs, perhaps with a powder of bone or stone dissolved within. You sip, the taste harsh and acrid, but you hope for relief. Perhaps you feel drowsy, the pain easing. Perhaps nothing changes. Yet in that act of drinking, you place trust in your community, your healer, your faith. A cup becomes more than liquid, it becomes a vessel of hope. The story of medicinal brews in the Middle Ages is a story of humanity grappling with sickness in the absence of knowledge. It is a tale of creativity and desperation, of genuine discovery and tragic error. Some of these drinks laid the foundation for modern medicine, their herbal ingredients later validated by science. Others remain as curiosities, reminders of how belief shapes practice. All of them speak to the human desire to heal, to find comfort in suffering, to believe that within a cup lies the power to restore life. As you rest, picture a medieval infirmary. Stone walls, flickering torches, the smell of herbs and smoke. Patients lie on straw beds, groaning with fever or pain. Monks move quietly, carrying cups of dark, bitter liquid. One is handed to you, its surface reflecting the firelight. You drink, grimacing at the taste, but with it comes the faintest sense of hope. Perhaps the cure lies within. Perhaps not. But in that moment, surrounded by faith and care, the cup is enough. It is a reminder that even in the harshest times, humanity sought to heal, to comfort, to endure. The Roman world is remembered for its grandeur, its roads, aqueducts, theaters, and sprawling empire. But behind the triumphs of Rome lies a quieter, more insidious story, the story of what they drank. For while Romans adored wine and elevated it into a daily necessity and a symbol of culture, they also unknowingly poisoned themselves with it. The culprit was lead, a metal they prized for its usefulness and sweetness. Lead found its way into Roman cups in the form of lead acetate, a compound used to sweeten wine. The result was a deadly luxury one that made drinks taste better, but slowly poisoned generations of Romans, especially the wealthy who drank it most often. The Romans loved wine in all its forms. They drank it diluted, flavored, spiced, and aged. But wine often spoiled, turning sour or unpleasant. To mask these flaws, Roman vintners experimented with additives. Among the most effective was Sapa, a syrup made by boiling grape juice down in lead vessels. The lead reacted with the acids in the juice, creating lead acetate, which imparted a sweet, smooth flavor. The Romans called it sugar of lead, and it became highly prized. Mixed into wine, it improved taste, preserved freshness, and lent an air of refinement. For the elite, lead-sweetened wine was a mark of luxury, a sign that they could afford the best. What the Romans did not know was that lead is toxic. Unlike herbs or spices, its effects were slow, invisible at first, but devastating over time. Lead accumulates in the body, damaging the nervous system, weakening bones, and causing a range of ailments, fatigue, infertility, madness, and eventually death. For wealthy Romans who consumed vast quantities of wine, often daily, the exposure was immense. They toasted their power and wealth with every sip, but beneath the surface, their bodies were crumbling. Some historians have suggested that lead poisoning contributed to the decline of the Roman elite, weakening both mind and body. Whether or not it played a decisive role, it was certainly a hidden curse in their cups. The use of lead was not confined to wine. Romans used lead pipes to carry water, lead vessels to cook food, and lead cosmetics for beauty. But wine was the most direct and dangerous route of exposure, for it was consumed in such abundance. A senator might drink several liters a day, his family joining him, all of them slowly poisoned. Even emperors were not spared. Some ancient writers describe Roman elites suffering from strange illnesses, gout, tremors, erratic behavior that could have been symptoms of lead poisoning. In their pursuit of luxury, they unknowingly destroyed themselves. Yet not all Romans drank lead-laced wine. The poor, who could not afford refined vintages, often drank simpler, sourer wines without the costly addition of sapa. Ironically, their poverty may have spared them from the worst effects. While the rich toasted with sweetened wine, the poor endured rougher flavors but healthier bodies. This division highlights the paradox of luxury. What was prized as refinement was, in fact, deadly, while what was scorned as crude was safer. In this way, lead-laced wine became a symbol of both privilege and peril. What did such wine taste like? Accounts suggest it was smooth, sweet, and pleasing, masking the sharpness of spoiled wine. To a Roman accustomed to harsh vintages, this sweetness must have felt like perfection. Imagine lifting a cup of dark wine, its flavor rich and mellow, no trace of sourness. You drink deeply, enjoying the luxury, never suspecting that each sip carries poison. The sweetness hides the danger, making the drink all the more seductive. It is a reminder that taste can deceive, that pleasure can conceal peril. The cultural importance of wine in Rome made this danger even more profound. Wine was not just a drink, it was a symbol of civilization, a marker of Roman identity. To be Roman was to drink wine, in contrast to the barbarian practice of drinking beer or mead. Wine was poured in temples, shared at banquets, and consumed daily by rich and poor alike. To taint this central element of Roman life with lead was to taint the very fabric of society. The irony is sharp. Rome, the pinnacle of civilization, poisoned itself in pursuit of refinement. Lead also found symbolic uses in Roman drinks beyond sweetening. Some medical recipes included lead compounds, thought to cure ailments. A doctor might prescribe a wine infused with lead salts to treat stomach issues or skin problems, believing the metal carried healing powers. In reality, such treatments only worsened conditions. But the belief in lead's utility was strong, rooted in the way it transformed liquids and seemed to purify them. The very properties that made it dangerous were mistaken for virtues. To the Romans, lead was a gift. To us, it is a cautionary tale. We might ask, did the Romans notice? Some evidence suggests they did. Ancient writers occasionally warned against lead, noting its harmful effects. Yet these warnings were rare, drowned out by the widespread use and acceptance of lead. Without modern science, the connection between cause and effect was too subtle to grasp. Illness was attributed to the gods, to humors, to fate, not to the sweet wine on the table. And so the practice continued, generation after generation, until lead became woven into the very taste of Roman luxury. Imagine a Roman banquet. Reclining guests sip from cups of sweetened wine, their laughter echoing in the marble hall. Platters of food are passed, music fills the air, and the wine flows endlessly. The flavor is perfect, smooth, and delightful, the mark of wealth and refinement. Yet beneath the surface, the poison works silently. Days turn to years, and the guests grow weaker, stranger, their bodies betraying them. They never suspect the drink in their hands is the culprit. The banquet is splendid, but its legacy is ruin. The story of lead-laced drinks is more than a tale of Roman folly. It is a reflection of humanity's tendency to embrace what pleases, even at a cost. We see it in other times and places, with tobacco, sugar, or alcohol itself. Pleasure and danger often walk together, and the cup that brings joy may also carry harm. The Romans remind us that luxury is not always safe, that sweetness can be deceptive, and that the pursuit of refinement can lead to downfall. Their story lingers in every glass we raise today, a whisper of caution amid the clink of cups. As you rest, picture yourself as a Roman reclining in a triclinium, a goblet of wine in hand. The taste is sweet, luxurious, soothing. Around you, friends laugh, music plays, the air is filled with incense. You drink deeply, savoring the perfection of the moment. But unseen, the sweetness carries a hidden cost, a poison that slowly seeps into your body. The banquet is beautiful, but beneath its splendor lies danger. In that cup of lead-laced wine is the paradox of Rome itself, brilliant and fragile, triumphant and doomed, sweet and deadly, all at once. When we think of ancient Egypt, we imagine the Nile flowing through golden deserts, temples rising toward the sky, and pharaohs adorned in glittering regalia. But beyond the grand monuments and royal tombs, there were subtler treasures drinks that carried mystery, ritual, and even intoxication. Among these were infusions made from the blue lotus flower, concoctions tied to sacred ceremonies, and liquids designed to connect the living with the divine. To sip from a cup in Egypt was never just to quench thirst. It was to participate in a culture where every ingredient carried symbolism, and where the line between daily life and eternity was as thin as the desert horizon. The blue lotus, Nymphea caerulea, was one of the most significant plants in Egyptian culture. Its striking petals, opening with the sun and closing at night, symbolized rebirth and the cycle of creation. In art, gods and pharaohs are often depicted holding blue lotus blossoms, inhaling their fragrance or presenting them as offerings. But the lotus was more than ornamental. The flowers and bulbs could be steeped in wine or water, creating a drink with mild psychoactive effects. Consuming lotus-infused beverages was believed to bring relaxation, euphoria, and perhaps even altered states of consciousness. In this way, the lotus became both symbol and substance, a bridge between beauty, ritual, and sensation. Egyptian banquets often featured wine flavored with blue lotus. Guests reclined in perfumed halls, drinking from cups adorned with images of the flower, while musicians played and dancers performed. The wine, infused with lotus, enhanced the atmosphere, creating a sense of joy and transcendence. To drink such a concoction was not only to enjoy the sweetness of wine, but also to partake in the symbolic rebirth carried by the lotus. It was as if each sip renewed life, aligning the drinker with the eternal cycles of the gods. Archaeological finds of jars containing lotus residues confirm that this was more than artistic imagination. It was a lived practice. But the lotus was not the only strange drink of the pharaohs. Texts and depictions suggest the existence of blue water, a mysterious infusion used in rituals. Some scholars believe this may have been a drink prepared with lotus, mandrake, or other psychoactive plants designed to induce altered states during religious ceremonies. Priests and initiates might have consumed such liquids in temples, seeking visions or communion with the divine. The exact recipes are lost to time, but the symbolism is clear. Water transformed by sacred plants became more than refreshment. It became a vessel of spiritual experience. Egyptian medicine also relied on strange brews. Papyrus texts list recipes involving beer or wine mixed with herbs, honey, and minerals. These drinks were prescribed for ailments ranging from stomach pain to fertility issues. Some contained ingredients we now recognize as effective, like garlic or willow bark, while others relied on symbolic associations. To drink was not only to heal the body, but also to invite divine favor. The gods were invoked in these remedies, their power believed to flow through the liquid into the patient. In this way, medicine, ritual, and drink were intertwined, each sip carrying layers of meaning. The use of alcohol in Egypt itself was complex. Beer was the drink of the masses, as we have seen, but wine was more closely tied to the elite, to banquets, and to religious offerings. Infusions and additives, lotus, herbs, honey, were ways of elevating wine beyond mere indulgence. A cup of wine could become a sacred act, especially when offered to the gods or consumed in temple rites. The Egyptians saw no sharp division between daily life and the sacred. A drink could be both nourishment and prayer, both pleasure and ritual. The vessel, the liquid, and the act of drinking were all imbued with meaning. We must also remember that in Egypt, the afterlife was as important as the present. Drinks were prepared not only for festivals and feasts, but also for eternity. Tombs contained jars of wine and beer, sometimes inscribed with the names of the deceased, ensuring they would have sustenance in the next world. In some tomb paintings, servants are shown preparing and pouring lotus-infused wine for the dead, just as they would for the living. The belief was that the pleasures and sustenance of life continued beyond death, and that drinks infused with sacred plants could accompany the soul into eternity. To drink in Egypt was to live forever, at least in spirit. What did these concoctions taste like? Imagine a wine sweetened with honey, flavored with the floral notes of lotus, perhaps with a faint bitterness from herbs. It would be fragrant, unusual, both familiar and strange. To the Egyptians, the taste was not only physical but symbolic, carrying the essence of the flower, the power of rebirth, the favor of the gods. To sip such a drink at a banquet, surrounded by music and incense, was to experience more than pleasure. It was to step into the eternal cycle of life, death, and renewal. The blue lotus itself carried associations with intoxication and ecstasy. Some images depict banquets where guests appear tipsy, their garlands slipping, their cups brimming. The combination of wine and lotus may have heightened these effects, creating a mood of both joy and transcendence. Drunkenness, in this context, was not shameful but sacred, a temporary dissolution of order that reflected cosmic renewal. In festivals dedicated to Hathor, goddess of love and music, drinking to excess was part of the celebration, echoing the myth where humanity was saved by beer dyed red to resemble blood. In such moments, drink was both delight and salvation, excess and renewal. Egyptian priests also used sacred drinks in rituals of initiation. Some scholars suggest that initiates into mystery cults may have consumed lotus or other infused drinks to induce visions. These visions, guided by priests, were interpreted as glimpses of the divine realm, affirming the initiate's place within the cosmic order. Whether these drinks truly induced altered states, or whether their power lay in the ritual context, the effect was the same: transformation, renewal, and connection. To drink was to cross a threshold, to leave the ordinary behind and step into the sacred. Consider the psychological power of these drinks. In a world where the Nile dictated life and death, where the sun rose and set with precision, and where eternity was always present in thought, the act of drinking a sacred concoction carried immense weight. Each sip connected the drinker to cosmic cycles, to gods who controlled destiny, to ancestors who lived on in the afterlife. A cup of lotus wine was not just a drink, it was a ritual in miniature, a way of embodying the great truths of existence in something as small as a swallow. The Egyptians, masters of symbolism, knew how to weave meaning into every detail, and their drinks were no exception. Imagine yourself at an Egyptian banquet. The air is warm, perfumed with incense and flowers. Musicians play harps, dancers move gracefully, and servants pour wine into cups. The wine is golden, its surface shimmering with the petals of blue lotus. You sip, the taste floral, sweet, slightly bitter. Around you, laughter rises, conversations flow, and night glimmers with beauty. Yet beneath the joy is symbolism. The lotus reminds you of rebirth, the wine of the Nile's bounty, the active drinking of your bond with the gods. You are not only celebrating, you are participating in eternity. The story of Egypt's strange drinks, lotus wine, blue water, sacred infusions, is the story of a culture that saw no boundary between the earthly and the divine. For them, every drink could carry meaning. Every sip could echo eternity. In their cups were joy, ritual, healing, and rebirth, woven together in liquid form. And though the recipes are lost, the idea remains that what we drink is never only liquid, but also symbol, story, and soul. In the drinks of the pharaohs, we glimpse not only their tastes, but their vision of life itself cyclical, eternal, and forever flowing like the Nile. When the Greeks and Romans looked northward, beyond their borders, they saw lands they considered wild, inhabited by people they called barbarians. These northern tribes, the Celts, the Germanic peoples, and countless others, lived in forests and plains, far from the vineyards and olive groves of the Mediterranean. To the civilized eye, their drinks were crude, strange, even repulsive. Yet for the people of the north, these brews were not only practical, but also central to their culture. Fermented from grains, herbs, fruits, and sometimes even animal parts, the strange drinks of the northern tribes tell us much about resilience, identity, and the ways humans everywhere sought comfort and community through what they consumed. Wine was rare in the north. The climate was too cold for vineyards, and imported wine was costly, reserved for elites or special occasions. Instead, the northern peoples brewed their own drinks. Mead, made from honey, was common among the Celts and Germanic tribes, but honey was scarce and precious. For everyday use, they turned to ales brewed from barley, wheat, or rye. Unlike the refined beers of later centuries, these ales were thick, unfiltered, and unpredictable. Fermentation was more art than science, and flavors varied wildly. To improve or sometimes simply to change the taste, brewers added whatever herbs or ingredients were available. One of the strangest practices was the use of gruit, a mixture of herbs used to flavor and preserve ale. Before hops became the standard, brewers added plants such as yarrow, bog myrtle, and wild rosemary. These herbs imparted not only flavor, but also psychoactive effects. Yarrow, for example, has mild hallucinogenic properties, while bog myrtle can enhance intoxication. Drinking ale flavored with such herbs was not just a way to quench thirst, but a way to alter the mind. For the northern tribes, intoxication was often linked to ritual, feasting, and even prophecy. A cup of herb-laced ale could open doors to visions, courage, or frenzy in battle. Some accounts suggest that animal parts were occasionally used in brewing. The inclusion of blood, bones, or fats might strike us as grotesque, but in cultures where waste was unthinkable, every part of an animal was valued. Mixing such ingredients into drinks could also carry symbolic weight, infusing the brew with the strength of the animal. A warrior drinking blood-infused ale might believe he was consuming the vitality of the beast, preparing himself for combat. Whether these practices were widespread or exceptional, they reflect a worldview in which drink was more than sustenance. It was power, spirit, and transformation. The Celts, in particular, were known for their love of feasting and drinking. Classical writers often described Celtic banquets as wild affairs, with warriors drinking deeply from communal vessels, their voices rising in song and boastful challenge. Mead and ale flowed freely, sometimes from great cauldrons that served entire gatherings. These communal drinks reinforced bonds of loyalty and identity, turning feasts into rituals of social cohesion. To drink together was to affirm one's place in the tribe, to share in its strength and stories. The drink in the cup was not just liquid, it was the glue of community. Germanic tribes shared similar traditions. Drinking horns, carved from ox or aurochs, were symbols of status and ritual. To be offered a horn of ale or mead was an honor, a recognition of worth. In sagas and myths, the act of passing the horn carried weight, binding warriors to lords, families to gods. The drink itself mattered, but the ritual mattered more. Each sip affirmed relationships, stories, and traditions, embedding drink into the very structure of society. For outsiders, the sight of barbarians drinking from horns of frothy ale may have seemed crude, but for the tribes themselves, it was sacred. The role of intoxication in northern cultures also shaped their reputation. Romans and Greeks often described barbarians as drunken and disorderly, prone to excess. Yet for the tribes, intoxication was often intentional, part of rituals that blurred the lines between order and chaos. Drunkenness in feasts could symbolize abundance, freedom, or divine ecstasy. In battle, intoxicated warriors might enter frenzied states, feared by their enemies. These practices reflected a worldview in which control and wildness were both valued, each with its place in life and ritual. The strange brews of the North carried not only physical effects, but symbolic meanings that shaped identity. What did these drinks taste like? They would have been earthy, sour, thick, and sometimes harsh. Herbal ales carried bitterness from yarrow or sharpness from bog myrtle. Mead was sweet, but not refined, often rough around the edges. Fruit ferments, choosing berries, apples, or whatever was available, added tartness and unpredictability. To modern palates, these drinks might seem unappealing, but for the people who brewed them, they were familiar, comforting, and necessary. Taste is cultural, and for the tribes of the North, their brews tasted of home, land, and life itself. We must also remember that these drinks were practical. Water was not always safe, and fermentation made it safer to drink. A mug of ale provided hydration, calories, and nutrients, sustaining farmers, warriors, and families alike. Brewing was also a way of preserving surplus grain or honey, turning harvests into something that could last through winter. Strange ingredients, whether herbs or animal parts, added not only flavor, but also preservation, making drinks last longer. What might seem bizarre to us was often rooted in practicality, shaped by the needs of survival. The symbolism of these brews extended into myth. In Celtic lore, cauldrons of endless drink appear as magical objects, granting wisdom, strength, or immortality. In Norse myth, mead was tied to the gods, to poetry, and to the afterlife. For the Germanic tribes, drink was part of oaths and rituals, binding warriors to destiny. These myths reflect the centrality of drink in life, not only as nourishment, but as metaphor. To drink was to partake in the cycles of abundance, to connect with ancestors, to glimpse the divine. Even the strangest ingredients carried meaning, woven into stories that gave them power. Imagine sitting in a smoky longhouse on a winter night. The fire crackles, the air heavy with the scent of roasting meat and damp wood. A horn is passed to you, filled with ale flavored with herbs, its taste bitter and sharp. Around you, warriors boast of battles, families share stories, songs echo through the rafters. You sip, the drink strange but warming, the bitterness fading into a sense of belonging. The brew in your hand is not refined, not luxurious, but it is alive with meaning. It ties you to the land, the people, the gods. In that moment, you are part of something larger than yourself, bound by drink, story, and song. The barbarian brews of the North may seem crude compared to the wines of Rome or the lotus drinks of Egypt, but they were no less important, no less meaningful. They sustained life, bound communities, and shaped identities. Their strangeness lies not in their ingredients, but in our unfamiliarity, our distance from the cultures that created them. To the people of the North, their drinks were perfect suited to their land, their needs, and their beliefs. And in their cups, we see not barbarism, but humanity, finding ways to endure, celebrate, and connect in the face of a wild and uncertain world. Today, coffee is one of the most beloved drinks in the world. Its aroma fills kitchens in the morning, its warmth fuels long nights, and its caffeine sharpens the mind. But before the rise of coffee in the Middle East around the 15th century, humanity had already discovered other ways to stay awake, alert, and energized. Across ancient cultures, people brewed early stimulants, drinks made from plants that quickened the pulse, cleared the mind, and gave strength for work or ritual. These strange, often bitter concoctions were, in many ways, the ancestors of coffee, showing us how deeply rooted the human craving for stimulation truly is. One of the earliest known stimulants was the cacao drink of Mesoamerica. Long before it became sweetened chocolate, cacao was prepared as a bitter, frothy liquid by the Olmecs, Maya, and Aztecs. The beans were roasted, ground, and mixed with water, chili peppers, and sometimes maize. The result was exoatl, a dark, invigorating drink with a stimulating effect thanks to theobromine and caffeine. To the Aztecs, cacao was sacred, associated with the god Quetzalcoatl, and consumed by warriors before battle or by nobles in ceremonies. It was not a casual refreshment, but a potent elixir of strength and ritual. Imagine drinking a frothy, bitter chocolate spiced with chili jarring at first, but electrifying in its effect. In China, tea leaves had been steeped for centuries, long before tea became the refined drink we know today. Early uses of tea were medicinal, with leaves boiled into strong, bitter brews thought to cleanse the body and restore energy. Farmers, monks, and workers valued tea for its ability to fight fatigue, while Buddhist monks used it to sustain long hours of meditation. The bitterness was a reminder of its potency, its energy a gift for those seeking focus or endurance. Over time, tea evolved into ceremony and art, but in its earliest days, it was a raw stimulant, closer in spirit to coffee than to the refined rituals of later centuries. In Africa, long before coffee cultivation, people in Ethiopia and surrounding regions chewed or brewed the leaves of the khat plant. Khat contains cathinone, a stimulant that heightens alertness and suppresses fatigue. Early records describe warriors chewing khat before battles, or farmers using it to sustain long hours of work. Later, it was steeped into infusions, a bitter drink that quickened the heart and sharpened the senses. Though controversial today, khat represents an ancient response to the universal need for energy, a plant that filled the same role coffee would later dominate globally. Other early stimulants were more surprising. In ancient India, betel nut areca was chewed for its stimulating effects, often wrapped in betel leaves with lime. While not always brewed as a drink, betel mixtures were sometimes steeped in water, creating a liquid stimulant with mild euphoria. Across the Pacific, kava root was brewed into a drink that relaxed the body but heightened mental clarity, used in rituals and gatherings. Though not strictly a stimulant like caffeine, kava offered a form of alert calmness that played a similar cultural role. Each region, it seems, found its own plants to create drinks that altered consciousness and extended endurance. The connection between stimulants and ritual is striking. Just as wine or mead was tied to gods and myths, so too were these early energizing drinks. Cacao was a divine gift in Mesoamerica, tea a meditative aid in China, khat a companion to warriors and farmers. The act of drinking was never just physical. It was cultural, symbolic, even sacred. The bitterness of these drinks often reinforced their power, as if unpleasant taste proved their potency. To endure the bitterness was to earn the energy, to show discipline, to partake in the gifts of the earth with respect. What did these drinks taste like? Imagine sipping cacao spiced with chili, thick and unsweetened, a shock to the tongue. Or chewing tea leaves steeped into a dark, bitter brew, harsh but invigorating. Or swallowing a khat infusion, acrid and sharp, leaving the mouth tingling. These were not comforting beverages, but bracing ones, designed to jolt the senses, to remind the drinker of their strength. Pleasure was not the point, energy was. Yet over time, cultures adapted, sweetening cacao, refining tea, blending herbs, until stimulation and enjoyment were joined in one cup. The discovery of stimulants also shaped societies in profound ways. Warriors drinking cacao before battle gained endurance. Monks drinking tea could meditate longer. Farmers chewing khat could work through the heat of the day. These small boosts of energy changed what was possible, extending human limits. They also created new rituals of community. Drinking tea together became a bond, sharing cacao a sign of nobility, chewing khat a mark of fellowship. Stimulants were not only about the self, they were about the group, the society, the culture. In every cup or chew, the human desire to push beyond natural limits was shared. In many ways, these early stimulants prepared the world for coffee. When coffee finally spread from Ethiopia into the Arab world, its effects were familiar. The quickening of the mind, the warding off of sleep, the creation of community around a cup. Coffee did not appear in a vacuum. It followed in the footsteps of cacao, tea, khat, and countless other plants that humans had already embraced. The craving was ancient. Coffee simply became the most successful expression of it, eventually conquering the globe. But behind every espresso or latte today lies a lineage stretching back thousands of years, to bitter brews sipped in forests, temples, and battlefields. Imagine yourself in ancient Mesoamerica. A cup of frothy cacao is placed before you, spiced with chili, its bitterness sharp. You sip, and warmth floods your chest. Your senses awaken. Your body feels ready for challenge. Or picture a monk in China, brewing tea leaves into a dark infusion, sipping slowly as he prepares for hours of meditation, the bitterness grounding him, the energy sustaining him. Or a farmer on the African plain, chewing khat leaves as the sun beats down, the fatigue falling away as focus sharpens. In each scene, the drink is not luxury but necessity, not sweetness but strength. The story of early stimulants is the story of humanity's endless pursuit of energy, focus, and endurance. Long before coffee became the global fuel of modern life, people across the world had already found ways to wake the mind and strengthen the body through plants. Their drinks were strange, bitter, sometimes unpleasant, but they carried power. And in their cups, we see ourselves creatures always reaching for more, always seeking to go further, always turning to the earth to find in its roots, leaves and seeds the secret to pushing past our limits. These strange drinks remind us that coffee is not the beginning, but only the latest chapter in a long, restless story. Across the ancient world, people discovered that certain drinks could do more than quench thirst or fill the belly. Alcoholic brews, herbal infusions, and psychoactive concoctions had the power to alter the mind, loosen inhibitions, and create sensations that felt otherworldly. For many societies, these effects were not accidents, but sacred tools. Intoxication was not just indulgence, it was ritual. To drink and feel transformed was to draw closer to the divine, to dissolve the boundaries between human and God, between body and spirit. In these rituals, intoxication was not shameful but essential, a doorway into mysteries that shaped religion, culture, and identity. One of the most famous examples comes from Greece, the cult of Dionysus. Festivals in his honor were filled with music, dance, and above all, wine. Participants drank deeply, often to the point of frenzy, believing that intoxication was a way of experiencing the god himself. Dionysus was not only the god of wine, but of ecstasy and transformation. To drink his gift was to be possessed by him, to shed ordinary constraints and feel divine freedom. The wild dances of the Maenads, the thundering processions, the shouts of joy and abandon, all were fueled by wine, both literal and symbolic. In these moments, drunkenness was sanctified, a ritual state of communion. In Egypt, intoxication also carried sacred weight. Festivals dedicated to Hathor, goddess of love and music, often involved heavy drinking. Participants consumed beer and wine in excess, sometimes infused with lotus or herbs, entering states of joy and abandon. These festivals echoed myths in which intoxication saved humanity, such as when Sekhmet, the fierce lion goddess, was pacified with beer dyed red to resemble blood. In celebrating through drink, the Egyptians were not merely indulging, they were reenacting divine stories, aligning themselves with cosmic events. To stagger, laugh, and sing in drunken joy was to join the gods in their eternal cycles. Among the Celts and Germanic tribes, communal feasting and drinking rituals played similar roles. Large cauldrons of mead or ale were shared among warriors and families, binding the group together. Intoxication loosened tongues, inspired songs, and created bonds of loyalty. In some cases, it was believed that drunken states allowed warriors to channel courage or even divine frenzy in battle. Ritual drinking also accompanied funerals and seasonal festivals, marking transitions with shared intoxication. The line between sacred and social blurred, for to drink together was both a religious act and a declaration of identity. The drink was a bridge, and intoxication the proof that it carried power. In the Americas, psychoactive brews such as ayahuasca or peyote-infused drinks were used in ceremonies to induce visions. Here, intoxication was not about joy or frenzy, but about transformation. Participants drank bitter, powerful liquids that led to vomiting, trembling, and visions. These altered states were interpreted as journeys into the spirit world, guided by shamans and filled with messages from ancestors or gods. Intoxication in this context was not indulgence, but discipline, a necessary ordeal to gain knowledge, healing, or spiritual renewal. The drink was both challenge and reward, a path that required courage to walk. Even in Mesopotamia, one of the earliest cradles of civilization, intoxication had ritual roles. Beer, brewed from barley, was not only a daily staple, but also an offering to the gods. In temples, jars of beer were poured out in sacrifice, and priests consumed beer as part of rituals. Intoxication was linked to fertility, abundance, and divine favor. Hymns to Ninkasi, the goddess of beer, praised her gift as one that brought joy to gods and humans alike. To drink was to participate in cosmic order, to honor the deities who sustained life. The buzz of beer was not a side effect, but part of the sacred connection. What unites these diverse practices is the idea that intoxication could shift perception and open doors. In daily life, humans are bound by rules, responsibilities, and limitations. But in ritual, these boundaries could be dissolved. A farmer in Egypt might become a reveler in Hathor's festival. A Greek philosopher might dance wildly at a Dionysian rite. A warrior might drink himself into fearless frenzy at a cultic feast. Intoxication was transformation, and transformation was sacred. It allowed people to step outside themselves, to glimpse eternity, to feel united with gods, ancestors, and community. The loss of control was not a danger but a pathway. What did these ritual drinks taste like? They varied: widely sweet mead, sour beer, resinous wine, bitter hallucinogenic brews. But taste was secondary. The true measure of the drink was its effect. To feel warmth, dizziness, joy, or visions was proof that the ritual worked. The unpleasantness of some brews was even part of the meaning. A bitter drink demanded endurance, a challenge that marked the seriousness of the ritual. Sweetness or smoothness, on the other hand, made intoxication seductive, drawing people into joy and abandon. Each flavor carried significance, shaping the experience of the ritual. The role of intoxication in ritual also reveals much about how societies viewed order and chaos. In daily life, discipline was necessary. Laws, rules, hierarchies kept the world stable. But in ritual, chaos had its place. To lose oneself in drink, dance, and ecstasy was to balance order with freedom. Festivals often inverted normal roles slaves, and masters drank together. Men and women danced as equals. Taboos were lifted. Intoxication created temporary worlds where ordinary rules were suspended, reminding people that life was not only structure, but also release. These moments of wildness were controlled, bound by ritual, but within them lay profound meaning. The dangers of intoxication were also recognized. Overindulgence outside of ritual could be condemned as weakness or sin, but within the sacred frame, intoxication was sanctified, its risks outweighed by its power. Priests, shamans, or leaders often guided these rituals, ensuring that the chaos served purpose. Whether through chants, myths, or structured ceremonies, the drink's effects were contained within meaning. A drunken frenzy in a marketplace might be shameful, but in a festival, it was divine. This distinction highlights the importance of context, of ritual, of belief in shaping human experience of intoxication. Imagine yourself at a festival in ancient Greece. The air is filled with the sound of pipes and drums. The crowd sways in rhythm, and cups of wine are passed from hand to hand. You drink, and soon the world feels different, lighter, freer, more alive. Around you, people dance, laugh, cry, and shout, their bodies and voices merging in ecstasy. You feel as though Dionysus himself is present, moving through the crowd, filling you with energy. Or picture yourself in the Amazon, sipping a bitter brew by firelight, guided by a shaman's chant. Visions rise, spirits speak, and you journey beyond yourself. In both cases, intoxication is not an accident, but the heart of the ritual, a doorway into mystery. The story of intoxication in ancient rituals is a reminder of how deeply human the search for transcendence is. Through drink, people sought joy, healing, courage, visions, and communion. They embraced the power of intoxication, not as weakness, but as a gift, a tool for transformation. In their cups were gods, ancestors, and mysteries, carried by the warmth of alcohol, the bitterness of herbs, the strangeness of psychoactive plants. Their rituals remind us that intoxication has always been more than indulgence. It has been a path to meaning, a way of stepping beyond the ordinary and into the sacred. As you rest, imagine lifting a cup in one of these rituals. The taste may be strange, the effect overwhelming, but soon you feel yourself shift. You are no longer just you. You are part of a dance, a vision, a celebration that stretches beyond time. In that intoxication lies connection, transformation, and mystery. The ancient rituals remind us that in the simplest of acts, drinking, we can find the most profound of experiences, as long as we know how to see them. Throughout history, countless strange drinks have been brewed, poured, and consumed, some lost to time, others transformed into familiar beverages. Yet a surprising number of odd concoctions have survived, slipping quietly from antiquity into our modern world. Though their origins may lie in sacred rituals, survival strategies, or cultural quirks, these drinks endure, reminding us of the continuity of human taste, tradition, and curiosity. They may not always look or taste the same as they once did, but their lineage stretches back centuries, even millennia. To sip one today is to share in the habits of ancestors, to drink history itself. Consider kvass, still consumed in Eastern Europe, especially Russia. Kvass is a mildly fermented drink made from bread, usually rye. It has been drunk for over 1,000 years, sustaining peasants and workers with its light alcohol content and sour, refreshing flavor. In medieval times, kvass was sometimes the only safe liquid available, its fermentation killing harmful bacteria. Today, bottles of kvass are sold on city streets, fizzy and brown, their taste tangy and slightly sweet. To drink kvass is to sip a medieval survival beverage dressed in modern clothes, its roots stretching back to times when bread and drink were inseparable. Another ancient survivor is pulque, a traditional drink of Mexico made from the fermented sap of the maguey plant. Long before the Spanish brought distillation, and created tequila and mezcal. Indigenous peoples of Mesoamerica drank pulque. Thick, white, and slightly viscous, it was considered sacred, linked to fertility and the gods. Aztec priests drank it in rituals, while commoners consumed it at festivals. Today, pulque still exists, sold in specialized taverns called pulquerias. Though overshadowed by its distilled descendants, it remains a living connection to pre-Columbian traditions, carrying forward both taste and symbolism. In Africa, fermented milk drinks like kefir and kumi continue to be consumed, much as they were centuries ago. Kumi, the fermented maize milk of the steppe, is still prepared in parts of Central Asia, a living link to the Mongol Empire. Kefir, originating in the Caucasus, has spread worldwide as a health drink, praised for its probiotics. Both carry the sour, tangy taste of ancient fermentation, a reminder that survival once depended on finding ways to preserve milk in harsh environments. Every sip of kefir, or kumi today, is a step back into nomadic tents and mountain villages, where these drinks first sustained life. Japan offers another example in sake, rice wine with origins stretching back nearly 2,000 years. Though refined today into a sophisticated beverage, sake began as a simpler rustic fermentation, sometimes even chewed and spat out to begin the process. Its role in Shinto rituals has remained constant, offered to gods and consumed at festivals. Drinking sake today is both a modern pleasure and an ancient rite, a continuity of culture preserved in the clarity of a cup. The same can be said of chicha in South America, a fermented corn drink that has existed since the Inca and beyond. Though recipes vary from thick and sour to light and effervescent, chicha remains central to communal gatherings. Its ancient roots intact, even stranger survivals exist. In some rural parts of Europe, people still prepare ox blood mixed with wine or spirits, echoing ancient traditions of drinking blood-infused concoctions for strength. Iceland's Brennivin, known as Black Death, carries on the harsh flavors of northern survival brews. In Southeast Asia, rice wines infused with snakes or scorpions are consumed both as curiosities and as health tonics, reflecting beliefs that go back to ancient ideas of absorbing strength from animals. These drinks may strike outsiders as bizarre, but to those who drink them, they are threads of continuity, ties to ancestral beliefs about power, health, and survival. Why do these strange drinks endure when so many others have been lost? Part of the answer lies in necessity. Drinks like kvass, chicha, and kefir solved problems of preservation, safety, and sustenance. They made unsafe water drinkable, preserved grains and milk, and provided calories during lean times. Their practicality ensured survival, and their taste became tradition. Another reason is ritual. Drinks tied to religion or culture, like sake or pulque, carry meanings that transcend taste. To drink them is to participate in a story larger than oneself, to join ancestors in a shared act across generations. And then there is curiosity. Humans have always sought novelty in taste, and strange drinks satisfy that craving. What do these survivors taste like? Kvass is malty, sour, with a bread-like aftertaste, light and refreshing. Pulque is tangy, slightly slimy, unusual, but satisfying to those accustomed to it. Kumi is sharp, fizzy, sour. Unlike any milk drink in the modern West, chicha can range from sweet to tart, depending on the fermentation. Snake-infused wines are strong, medicinal, carrying the earthy flavor of herbs and reptiles. None of them conform to modern mainstream palates, yet all carry the authenticity of tradition. Their strangeness is part of their charm, proof that they have resisted homogenization. Imagine yourself at a Russian street stall, sipping kvass on a hot summer day. The drink is cool, sour, refreshing, its bread-like flavor strange but comforting. Or in a Mexican pulqueria, lifting a cup of thick, white pulque, its tangy taste linking you to Aztec festivals of centuries past. Or in a Mongolian yurt, sharing kumi with a family, the sour fizz surprising but warming in its hospitality. Each sip is not just taste but history, a connection to people long gone but still present in tradition. These strange drinks endure because they are more than liquid. They are identity, memory, and continuity. The survival of these drinks also shows how human culture adapts. Some have been transformed pulque, overshadowed by tequila, tea refined into ceremony, cacao turned into sweet chocolate. Others remain close to their ancient forms, stubbornly unchanged. In both cases, the thread is unbroken. The strange drinks of the past remind us that taste is never static, that what seems odd today may one day be ordinary, and what is ordinary may once have been sacred. They challenge us to see beyond modern preferences and to taste the world as it was, in all its strangeness and wonder. As you settle into rest, imagine sipping one of these ancient survivals. The flavor may be odd, the texture unusual, but with it comes a sense of continuity. You are not just drinking, you are sharing a moment with ancestors, joining in a ritual that has spanned centuries. The strange drinks that survive into modern times are living history, reminders that humanity's thirst has always been about more than survival. It has been about meaning, community, and the joy of raising a cup, no matter how unusual its contents may seem. We have traveled together through a long journey, exploring some of the strangest, most fascinating drinks in human history. From the gritty survival brews of clay and ash, to the sacred Lotus wine of Egypt, to the lead-sweetened luxuries of Rome, each chapter has revealed not only what people drank, but why they drank it. These liquids, odd as they may sound to our modern ears, were never merely about thirst. They were about survival, ritual, medicine, community, and meaning. To sip from the strange cups of the past was to connect to life itself, in all its harshness, mystery, and beauty. As we wandered through these stories, we saw how drinks could carry the weight of gods and myths. In Greece and Rome, wine was not only flavored with herbs or resin, but infused with divine presence, tied to Dionysus and Bacchus. In India, the mysterious Soma promised immortality, its taste lost to time, but its memory preserved in sacred hymns. In the Americas, psychoactive brews carried visions of ancestors and spirits, guiding communities in their choices and healing. Intoxication itself became sacred, a bridge to other worlds. In every culture, drinks were more than liquid, they were doorways to meaning. We also saw how necessity gave birth to creativity. The Egyptians brewed beer that sustained workers building pyramids, turning grain into nourishment and symbol. The nomads of the steppe transformed mare's milk into kumi, a sour, fizzy drink that carried them across endless horizons. Roman soldiers drank Posca, sour wine diluted with water, because it was safer than streams and wells. Peasants across medieval Europe drank kvass or small ale for the same reason. Even the desperate drinks of famine clay water, ash, or mud speak of humanity's relentless will to endure. The drinks may have been unpleasant, but they kept people alive, carrying them through hardship. Some drinks revealed the darker side of luxury. Roman elites, sipping sweetened wines laced with lead, unknowingly poisoned themselves in their pursuit of refinement. In China, emperors consumed mercury elixirs, hoping for immortality, only to hasten their own deaths. In both cases, drinks designed to preserve life brought destruction instead. These stories remind us that taste, status, and ambition can sometimes lead us astray. The cup that seems divine may hold danger, and the sweetest sip may conceal poison. History whispers caution, even as it fascinates us with its strangeness. Other drinks remind us of continuity, of the way traditions endure. The mead of the Vikings, flavored with herbs and tied to myths, still exists today, brewed in small batches for those who want to taste history. The cacao drink of the Maya evolved into modern chocolate, its bitterness sweetened, its sacredness softened, but its lineage intact. Chicha, pulque, kvass, kefir, and some of these are still consumed in corners of the world, living bridges between past and present. To drink them is to share in a ritual older than memory, to let history flow across the tongue and into the body. What unites all these stories is the human relationship with drink as more than necessity. Every culture we have explored shows us that to drink is to express identity, to connect with others, to reach for something beyond the self. Whether through sacred intoxication, survival brews, medicinal tonics, or communal feasting, drinks carried meaning far richer than their ingredients. The strangeness of these concoctions fades when we see the humanity in them, the mother soothing her child with herbal ale, the warrior drinking kumi before battle, the priest offering lotus wine to the gods, the farmer quenching thirst with Posca on a hot march. Each cup tells us not just about ingredients, but about people, their lives, their hopes, their struggles. Imagine, as we close, standing in a hall of history where all these cups are gathered. Clay jars from Egypt, bronze cauldrons from Celtic feasts, wooden bowls from the steppes, gourds from the Amazon, porcelain from China. Each holds a liquid strange to us, yet cherished to those who once drank it. You walk slowly among them, lifting each cup in turn. The flavors are unusual sour, bitter, floral, earthy, sometimes harsh, but with each sip, you feel a connection, a thread stretching across centuries. You taste not just the liquid, but the lives of those who came before. In every swallow is a story, in every cup a civilization. As you drift into rest, let these stories linger like the aftertaste of a rich drink. Strange though they were, these beverages sustained empires, shaped rituals, and carried dreams of eternity. They tell us that human beings, across time and place, have always sought more than mere survival in their cups. We have sought meaning, joy, connection, and transcendence. Even the strangest drinks remind us that history is alive in the simplest acts, raising a cup, sharing a drink, toasting to life itself. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the weirdest drinks in ancient history and beyond. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling us what part of history fascinates you most. And when you listen in, your thoughts and presence help keep these stories flowing. Until next time, may your dreams be as rich as the cups of the past, and may you find rest in the gentle stream of history.